Welcome to our channel. Hollywood Movie Review. Rockn Rolla 2008 Movie Review. Rockn Rolla is a 2008 crime comedy film written and directed by Guy Ritchie, featuring an ensemble cast that includes Gerard Butler, Tom Wilkinson, Thandiwe Newton, Mark Strong, Idris Elba, Tom Hardy, Toby Kebbell, Jeremy Piven and Ludacris. It was released in the United Kingdom on September 5, 2008, reaching #1 in the UK box office in its first week of release. The film received mixed reviews from critics. In London, mob boss Lenny Cole rules the ever-growing real estate business, using a corrupt counselor for bureaucratic fixing, and his right-hand man Archie for the dirty side of things. A billionaire Russian businessman, Yuri Almovich, plans a fixed land deal, and London's crooks all seem to want a piece of it, particularly Yuri's underhanded accountant Stella, and a gang called the Wild Bunch led by small-time crook 1-2, his partner Mumbles, and their driver Handsome Bob. Yuri agrees to Lenny's price of €7 million for bribing the council, and as a sign of trust, lends him his lucky painting. Yet when Yuri arranges for Stella to move the funds, she double-crosses him and hires the Wild Bunch to steal the money. Additionally, Lenny's estranged and drug-addicted stepson Johnny Quid steals the painting from Lenny's office after faking his own death. Lenny and Archie then coerce Johnny's former talent managers Mickey and Roman into tracking down Johnny. In a subplot, Handsome Bob gets close to Stella's gay husband, a lawyer who has information on a long-time unknown informant in their criminal circle, and asks 1-2 for a single dance before Bob goes to prison after the informant exposed him. Yuri tasks Stella once more with covertly siphoning the necessary payoff from his holdings, despite his growing suspicion of her. Yet when his money men are once again robbed by the Wild Bunch, his assistant Victor convinces him that Lenny is likely to be behind the robberies, and is also purposely keeping Yuri's lucky painting from him. Yuri and Victor then invite Lenny to a private golf game, where Victor beats him with a golf club, finishing by breaking Lenny's leg as a warning to return his painting. Wild Bunch friend Cookie happens to buy the painting from a couple of crackheads who stole it from Johnny's hideout. Cookie then gives the painting to 1-2, who in turn offers it to Stella as a token of appreciation after a sexual encounter. After Stella leaves his flat, 1-2 is surprised by Yuri's henchmen but is rescued, and subsequently kidnapped, by Archie and his goons, who had come looking for Yuri's money. Yuri wants to marry Stella, whom he has long admired. He goes to Stella's house to propose, but he then spots the painting. Stella lies and says she has had it for years. Yuri, enraged by Stella's betrayal, orders Victor to kill her. Archie brings Johnny, Roman, Mickey and the Wild Bunch to Lenny's warehouse, where Lenny orders Johnny and the Wild Bunch executed. Handsome Bob offers the legal documents concerning the informant in his pocket to Archie. Archie recognizes the pseudonym used on documents, Sidney Shaw, as belonging to Lenny. Lenny had arranged with the police to routinely lock up many criminal associates, including Archie, for years at a time to ensure his own freedom and while also enhancing his own standing in the criminal underworld. Archie orders Lenny's men to free the Wild Bunch and has Lenny drowned and fed to crayfish. In the elevator, Johnny explains to Roman and Mickey that they will also be killed to leave no witnesses, and graphically explains the manner of their executions. His description unnerves the man tasked to execute the trio, prompting him to act prematurely. Having already anticipated this move, Johnny warns Mickey and Roman to intervene and kill their would-be executioner. Johnny shoots 2 more men waiting at the top of the elevator, and with help from the Wild Bunch, they escape the last of Archie's men. Later, Archie picks up Johnny from rehab and gives him Yuri's lucky painting as a welcome home present, remarking that obtaining the painting cost a very wealthy Russian an arm and a leg. Johnny proclaims that, with his newfound freedom from addiction and his stepfather, he will do what he could not do before, become a real Rockn Rolla. In a post-credit scene, 1-2 accedes to Handsome Bob's request to dance with him. In May 2007, director Guy Ritchie announced the production of Rockn Rolla, to be produced by Ritchie's own company, Tough Guy Films, Joel Silver's Dark Castle Entertainment, and French company Studio Canal, with distribution by Warner Brothers Pictures. The following June, Ritchie hired the cast for Rockn Rolla, and filming began on location in London on June 19, 2007. 2 scenes were filmed at Stoke Park, Buckinghamshire, the opening scene on the grass tennis courts, and the round of golf which takes place on the 21st green with the clubhouse in the background. The film was shot on the Aeroflex D20. During post-production, producer Joel Silver screened the film to several studios, including Lionsgate and Sony Pictures. Warner Brothers Pictures handled distribution for the film, and it was released theatrically on September 5, 2008 in the UK and October 10, 2008 in the US. Critical reaction to the film has been mixed, with a 60% rating out of 147 reviews on the film review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, with an average rating of 5.98/10. The critical consensus states, mixed reviews for Guy Ritchie's return to his London-based Cockney-wide boy gangster movie roots, but most agree, it's a step in the right direction following two major turkeys. The website Metacritic, which compiles and then aggregates major film critics' reviews, gave the film a 53 out of 100, which is categorized as having mixed or average reviews. While the film's unoriginal themes were criticized, the script and direction, as well as the performances of Strong, Butler and Kebbell, were praised. IGN gave the film a positive review with 4 out of 5 stars, saying hardly reinventing the wheel with this movie, but Rockn Rolla is nonetheless a comedy thriller that is every bit as accomplished as his early work, and without doubt a witty, adrenaline-fueled blast from start to finish. Roger Ebert gave the film 3 stars, stating that it never slows down enough to be really good, and never speeds up enough to be the Bourne mortgage crisis, but there's one thing for sure, British actors love playing gangsters as much as American actors love playing cowboys, and it's always nice to see people having fun. Newton revealed that Ritchie stated that he hopes to extend Rockn Rolla into a trilogy, in the event that the film receives enough positive attention. At the end of the film there is a title card stating Johnny, Archie and the Wild Bunch will be back in the real Rockn Rolla. According to both the audio commentary and an interview with Ritchie, the second film has been written and is awaiting studio approval. In a 2011 interview, promoting Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows, when asked about a possible Rockn Rolla sequel, Ritchie said, I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. I've written a script, I think it's a great script, and Joel wants to pay for me to do it. But up until now we haven't had the time to do it. It's sitting there and we'd all like to do it, it's just a question of when we're going to fit it in. So we'll wait and see. He also mentioned that as long as Warner Brothers keeps throwing him big movies like the Sherlock Holmes films and The Man from U.N.C.L.E., then it may not be happening soon. There is one word that comes to mind when I think about Rockn Rolla: cool. The movie is directed by Guy Ritchie, who has directed movies such as Snatch and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. This movie is a lot like those. The story has many subplots that all connect to each other by the end. The movie is full of unique characters that have their own unique quirks. This excellent ensemble cast includes Gerard Butler, Tom Wilkinson, and Thandie Newton. The actors have a lot of freedom to play up their characters and make them seem terrible but with a sense of humor. Ritchie is able to do that in all of his movies. He can set the character up to be this horrible person, but always can find humor in them and in their situations. No character is perfect in a Ritchie movie, and they all are greedy in one way or another. They want it all. The movie centers around a mob boss, Wilkinson, who owns the town, and a Russian who wants to give him a lot of money to build an arena in his town. In the mix, there is a group called the Wild Bunch, Butler, Idris Elba and Tom Hardy, who want money, and an accountant, Newton, who hires them. Let's not forget the rock star junkie, Toby Kebbell, who is missing and must be found. However, the problems start with a missing painting. A very important and lucky painting. The plot unfolds from there. As soon as the movie starts with its opening credits, you know this movie is going to be a roller coaster ride. I mean that in a good way. The way Ritchie tells this story is entertaining and cool. The way the movie opens is cool, and the way the movie ends is cool. And of course, the music in it is cool. This movie isn't so far from his others that I mentioned earlier, but it does deliver like the others. Rockn Rolla is a movie that sets itself apart from others. It allows itself to have freedom in its storytelling and have fun with it as well. Ritchie has his own way of doing things, but he still tells a good story with great characters while letting the humor and entertainment roll with the punches. Guy Ritchie just keeps taking one hit after another. After unleashing a few cult classics around the turn of the millennium, Ritchie's films have ranged from forgettable to downright bad. Combined with the fact that his now ex-wife may or may not have been sleeping around with Alex Rodriguez, his life is just not looking up at the moment. His latest film, Rockn Rolla, is thankfully his best movie in years, though it still leaves something to be desired. Rockn Rolla is about a couple of mob bosses named Lenny and Yuri, Tom Wilkinson and Gerard Butler, who strike up an under-the-table real estate deal. Unfortunately, Yuri's accountant, Thandiwe, is stealing from her boss with the help of two unknowing grunts for hire, Idris Elba and Gerard Butler, who also own Lenny money, which leads Yuri to suspect that Lenny is trying to dupe him out of millions of dollars. Meanwhile, Lenny's drugged-out stepson steals a painting that Yuri has given Lenny, so Lenny sends his men to hunt down the loser of a kid. As with all Guy Ritchie films, Rockn Rolla quickly spirals out of control from there. While the movie is complex, Rockn Rolla may be Ritchie's safest film to date. Gone are a lot of Ritchie's frenetic directing traits, replaced with a glossier, more stable approach that makes the movie feel more mainstream but also makes it feel longer and slower. Rockn Rolla is nearly 2 hours long, and had 15 or 20 minutes been shaved from the running time, it would have been perfect. It's a smart film with good acting and a clever screenplay, but it suffers from pacing issues. Without Ritchie's crazy camera work, there are a few dull sequences or stretches that come off as overly long. Still, those looking for an edgy, complex crime comedy thriller should look no further than Rockn Rolla. It has enough laughs, crazy characters and bloodshed to satisfy. Butler and Wilkinson turn in great performances, and thankfully Newton isn't doing her Condoleezza impression here. In fact, she looks downright smoking. Rockn Rolla should satisfy Guy Ritchie fans, but the movie still doesn't give the director his chance to jump back into the mainstream. A further return to his roots would do him well, and perhaps a guest appearance by Brad Pitt. A return to form for Guy Ritchie? Maybe. Considering he's coming off two career-scuppering flops, Swept Away, Revolver, this might be more of a run for cover. Like his early, funny films, Rockn Rolla, the title is supposed to be slang for some sort of criminal bigshot, but reminded me of the Mad Max 2 villain hailed as the Ayatollah of Rockn Rolla, is a shaggy dog story of London criminality with vivid crookney types tangled up in feuds and quests and cross-purposes activities. Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels brought forth a flood of imitators, which puts the originator of the Ladmag Gangland film at a disadvantage as he returns to his original patch after it's been used up and trashed by everyone else. Also, the central quarter of Lock, Stock were, whatever their legal situations, essentially innocents, and you hoped they'd get away with it. Everyone here is guilty as hell, and, for all the dazzling verbals and a varied cast of welcome presences, it's truly hard to like or care about any of them. When, in the climax, it turns out that shady bossman Lenny Cole, Tom Wilkinson, has broken the code of the underworld and turned informer, there's a sense of moral outrage which doesn't take away from the fact that the folks he sent up all deserve to go to jail, and have spent the whole film variously doing rotten things with sheepish looks as if they were in a harmless old Ealing comedy crime world rather than committing robbery with major violence or stabbing bouncers with a pencil. Archie, Mark Strong, Lenny's sharp-suited lieutenant, narrates and is the only one who shows any moral compunction about cheating mates, but he's still as much a thug as anyone else, think Gabriel Byrne in Miller's Crossing, but without the depth. The plot involves a Russian tycoon, Gerard Butler, who wants a planning deal to go through, accountant Stella, Thandiwe, who leaks information about bribe money transfers to a gang of robbers called the Wild Bunch, Gerard Butler, Idris Elba, Tom Hardy, who've been screwed over by Lenny, a corrupt comedy counselor, Jimmy Mystery, a fabulous painting, which we never see, lent by the Russian to Lenny and stolen by his junkie rock star stepson Johnny Quid, Toby Kebbell, Johnny's Cowd. Management team, Jeremy Piven, Chris Bridges, a dope dealer, Matt King, an erudite ticket tout, Nonso Anazi, of Cass, Stella's conveniently gay lawyer husband who has even more convenient access to plot-furthering papers than a pair of comedy Russian hard men. A recent crime cliché is the almost unkillable but inept Russian mob goon. If it weren't for Strom's narration, it wouldn't hang together, but the verbiage keeps it on track as Ritchie shows off with editing tricks. A joke sex scene composed of tiny snippets is a good one, and the occasional walk-on freak-out character. The patter is funny, but most of the talented cast coast, only Kebbell really attacks his role, which turns out to be monstrous, and it's possible that the movie's love affair with cool criminals is starting to wane. After 2 hours in this company, I was primed for a BBC News-style balancing statement from a spokesperson for the rights of victims of crime. Everybody wondered what happened to Guy Ritchie's talent after Snatch because it seemed to have disappeared overnight. M. Night Shyamalan. Swept Away was not very good. Revolver was a very nice film to look at but a nightmare to follow since it didn't have a sense of humor, but then he comes along and gives us Rockn Rolla, which is thankfully a bit of a return to form for the British gangster film director. Rockn Rolla focuses on many characters all willing to backstab, rob, kill for personal gain. I won't even bother explaining the plot except that British crime lord Lenny Cole, Tom Wilkinson, borrowed a good luck painting from the Russians that they want back, but too bad because it's been nicked by his son Johnny Quid, Toby Cabell. While this happens, the Russians are having a hard time paying Lenny for a real estate deal because their money keeps getting stolen by a group called the Wild Bunch, Gerard Butler, Idris Elba, Tom Hardy, that owe Lenny money anyway. Everyone's suspicious of one another, but at the same time everyone needs one another, and if you can put it all together you get a story that goes up and down and left and right without letting up. Like all Guy Ritchie films, this is a very convoluted film filled with paper-thin characters that have a great sense of humor. And that's all this screenplay really has going for it. Stick in some fun action sequences, hyper-stylized shots, and it becomes pure pulp that's fun to watch. Not to mention that the performances are all very good in keeping up the witty timing to it all. This is not near the caliber of Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch, since it doesn't exactly keep up at a frenetic pace. Instead, Rockn Rolla kinda goes through a big lull for the first hour, except when it picks up, it really picks up, and everything prior is kind of all forgotten by the time the action kicks in. Many people will probably disagree with this review and claim it to be a big mess with too many characters, too much narration, and too much witty banter, but I don't think Ritchie's attempting to be deep or cause catharsis. Yes, this movie is flawed, yes, the plot is convoluted, and yes, the characters aren't very well planned, but it's very comedic, very entertaining, has a very good cast and some crazy camera work that elevates the picture from bland to just good old fun. I'm looking at Rockn Rolla and I'm thinking, why make a movie about stealing a parcel of London real estate, when you could make a movie about stealing $1 trillion of real estate? British gangsters may dress better than Wall Street overlords and be more colorful, but they just don't think big. After watching Richard S. Fuld, CEO of Lehman Brothers, squirm before the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, Hogerform, as he explained why he deserved $350 million for guiding his company into bankruptcy, I found it refreshing to watch hoodlums squirm because they might get personally kneecapped without even so much as a golden hang glider. Guy Ritchie's latest movie is about some very hard cases from the London and Russian underworlds who are all trying to cheat on one another, and about an accountant who the term femme fatale has been hanging around waiting to describe. It's one of those rare circular con jobs where you can more or less figure out what's going on, and you can more or less understand why nobody else does, although at various times, they all think they do, and at other times, you're wrong. While they engage in these miscalculations, they act terrifically dangerous to one another so smoothly you'd swear they were in the second year of a repertory tour. You know who Tom Wilkinson is. You may not recognize him here, for reasons I won't describe because then you would. He's funny and terrifically dangerous as Lenny Cole, a gangster with the memory of a tax collector. He owns or has leveraged great swaths of London, including one swath urgently required by a Russian gangster named Yuri Obamovich, Kirill Rodin, who comes to Cole. Now follow this attentively. 1-2, Gerard Butler, Handsome Bob, Tom Hardy, and Mumbles, Idris Elba, whose parents may have been Dick Tracy fans, borrows $7 million from Cole to buy some land. Cole secretly owns the land and won't sell it to them, and arranges to steal the money back and demands to be paid. So he has the money and still has his land. Ken Lay would be proud. But that's the simple part. Now Yuri pays Cole $7 million to put the fixin' on his own swath deal through Cole's tame London councilman, offering Cole his good luck painting as security. The femme fatale, Tandy Newton, Yuri's accountant, sees a way to sidetrack the money herself. She hires 1-2 and Mumbles to steal Cole's $7 million, which she doesn't know is briefly their $7 million, from which they can pay $2 million to Cole and he won't kill them, but they lose the money and Cole doesn't have the $7 million to pay Yuri, and meanwhile, the invaluable good luck painting has been stolen, so at this point I'm not sure who has the money, maybe the femme fatale. But Cole needs it to give Yuri, and Yuri desperately needs it for harrowing reasons of his own, and the councilman needs it to save his career. Yuri may not give a damn about his priceless painting, but Cole doesn't know that, and he sends Archie, Mark Strong, and Mickey, Chris Ludacris Bridges, to find out who stole the painting, and oh my god. It's in the hands of Cole's own stepson, the druggy Rockn Rolla Johnny Quid, Toby Cabell, and Cole discovers that if there's anyone harder to deal with than a Russian mafioso, it's a druggy Rockn Rolla stepson. Now don't go medieval on me because I gave away the whole plot, because that's only the first time around the block. Right now you can't remember what I said, and I may have gotten large parts of it wrong, although my fingers were bleeding from scribbling notes. The bottom line is, all these people chase the same money around with the success of doggy tail biting, and it's a lot of fun, and it's not often in these con films that everybody is conning everybody, and they're all scared to death, and nobody knows which cup the pea is under. Rockn Rolla, which is how they say Rock'n Roller in the East End, isn't as jammed with visual pyrotechnics as Ritchie's Lock, Stock and Smoking Barrel, 1998, but that's okay, because with anything more happening, the movie could induce motion sickness. It never slows down enough to be really good, and never speeds up enough to be the Bourne mortgage crisis, but there's one thing for sure, British actors love playing gangsters as much as American actors love playing cowboys, and it's always nice to see people having fun. If you told me a few weeks ago back in September that I would have lived to see my home team win the World Series and would have seen Guy Ritchie make a good movie again in the same week, I would have probably shanked you to death. But it's happened, and I'm surprised like fuck. The Phillies, which is without a doubt the best team in the league now, and try and fight that with me, because we can just look at the stats, win the World Series and everyone is surprised. Some of us probably still don't believe that the Phillies have won the World Series this year. I'm the person that still doesn't believe that Guy Ritchie made such a film like Rockn Rolla. Yes, remember that Guy Ritchie back in 1998 and 2000? Neither did I, until today. After Snatch he came out with one of the worst films that I've ever seen, the remake of Swept Away, starring none other than his soon-to-be ex-wife Madonna. Then he directed with Revolver, which really isn't terrible, just so fucking boring. If you really want to know how boring it is, I fell asleep during it. I've only fallen asleep while watching 2 movies in my life, and that was one of them. But after this, I totally forgot about that shitty remake and that cure to insomnia. I really don't want to say anything this close in the review, but Rockn Rolla is one of the best and most fun films of the year. People ask the question, what's a Rockn Rolla? Says Archie, Mark Strong, in a voiceover at the beginning of the film. His boss, Lenny, Tom Wilkinson, has control of London's real estate. 2 gangsters, 1-2, Gerard Butler, and Mumbles, Idris Elba, ask Lenny to finance a piece of real estate property by giving them a loan. Instead, he double-crosses them and they are in millions of pounds in debt. They meet Stella, Tandy Newton, who plans on stealing money from her boss Yuri, Karel Rodin, a Russian mobster. In order for Stella to get some of the money back, she hires 1-2 and Mumbles and their friend Bob, Tom Hardy, to do the dirty work. It turns out that Yuri and Lenny are in the middle of settling a deal on real estate, and Yuri gives Lenny his good luck painting for a while. When it gets stolen, Lenny tells Archie to keep a close eye on all of the gangsters in the area. He also keeps a watch on Lenny's stepson Johnny Quid, Toby Kebbell, who fakes his death to get more record sales and do as much heroin as he possibly can. Guy Ritchie is back in full form, introducing us new characters that we learn to love that are in a similar style of the characters in his first 2 films. Rockn Rolla relies on a little technique that Alfred Hitchcock used to use back in his days, the good old MacGuffin. It worked for other gangster films such as Pulp Fiction, and it most certainly works here. Here, the MacGuffin is the painting that is lent to Lenny. Like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, we never see what the painting looks like. We just know that it is very valuable to Yuri. This is the most important part of the film because it drives the story. But the film is all about how we get things that we don't give back. This is all centered on Lenny, who is the description of a real Rockn Rolla. He promises to give it to 1-2, but doesn't give it all, and 1-2 is in a whole bunch of shit. It is almost a godsend to 1-2 that Lenny is in a whole bunch of shit when someone breaks into Lenny's place and steals the painting. This becomes important because we are witnessing Lenny's business deal going sour. If only you would have helped 1-2, this might not have happened. Fucking Jigsaw couldn't even give him a better punishment. Hell, I'm getting too far ahead of myself. Rockn Rolla isn't about its themes, but all that Guy Ritchie is just trying to show us is that he can still have fun making movies, and you can have fun watching them. There is never a dull moment in Rockn Rolla, nothing feels out of place or like it should have been left on the cutting room floor. There is just enough action to be balanced with the right amount of humor to the right amount of story. The plot seems a little bit complicated, but I assure you, it's easy enough to figure out. The film wouldn't be without some of the great acting though. The movie is led by Gerard Butler, who plays almost the exact opposite of who he played in 300. Idris Elba comes back from starring in a shitty horror remake to one of the most entertaining gangsters in film history. Tom Wilkinson brings his guns to Rockn Rolla. It is easy to hate his character, but it is also easy to love his role. Thandie Newton is flawless in Rockn Rolla, which is pretty funny because she starred in W a few weeks ago where she doesn't do anything but look good. Mark Strong, who also starred in Body of Lies a few weeks ago and did a great job, gives a flawless performance also, so much that I think he should be nominated for an Oscar for this role. But the actor that I'm most impressed with is Toby Kebbell, who plays the heroin-addicted rock star. As I fall asleep tonight, I will have to try and take everything in my team winning the World Series and Guy Ritchie making a great movie again. This really is too much for 1 week. When next week rolls around, the only thing that I will be surprised about is how come there is not a single fine movie like Rockn Rolla released in theaters. There are few writers and or directors who can successfully intertwine remarkable, seemingly unrelated characters and side stories in a coherent fashion. In the States, Quentin Tarantino, of Pulp Fiction fame, takes the honors. Across the pond, the award goes to Guy Ritchie, whose body of work contains such memorable films like Snatch and Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. After some recent slip-ups, Ritchie has finally decided to refocus and try to recapture his early success with his latest hip, gangster flick Rockn Rolla. Like his other applauded films, Rockn Rolla shares many of their traits, a plot device, known as a MacGuffin, that connects the disparate subplots, and bumbling criminals that all have quick-witted tongues and exhibit some level of bravado, deserved or not. Seems Ritchie is a bit rusty though, as his characters aren't as smooth or as cool as they could have been and the story isn't as sharp as it should have been. While I'm still not entirely sure, the man I think we're supposed to build a connection with is a small-time head known as 1-2, Gerard Butler. He and his partners in crime, Mumbles, Idris Elba, and Handsome Bob, Tom Hardy, have dreams of the big time, but when they get too big for their britches, they find themselves smacked down by the self-proclaimed city kingpin Lenny, Tom Wilkinson. Lenny unfortunately finds himself in a bit of jam too, when a lucky painting lent to him by Yuri, Karel Rodin, a Russian mobster, gets stolen. Further complicating the story, Yuri has his own set of problems, seems every time he withdraws cash to close his business dealings it gets stolen. Needless to say, both Lenny and Yuri need what each has lost to finalize their underhanded agreement, and in their efforts to gain back what is theirs, secrets concerning all involved, including a drugged-out rock star named Johnny Quid, Toby Kebbell, come to the forefront. Try saying the preceding paragraph 5 times fast. To say there is a lot going on is an understatement. Ritchie throws the kitchen sink at Rockn Rolla, and in some instances there is a big payoff. One thing Ritchie is good for is adding some wry, edgy comedy in unexpected places in his movies. One such scene I particularly liked involved an uncomfortably slow dance sequence. Another, shot and edited roughly, has several Russian bruisers chasing Butler's character up and down railway tracks, ends in cocky way that comes back to haunt 1-2 later in the film. On the other end of the spectrum, I wasn't impressed with the last-second twists. I couldn't shake the feeling that the main reveal was put in place at the last minute. It was out of place and completely unneeded from a storyboard point of view. As for the characters, there isn't a sympathetic one in the lot. 1-2 is probably the most charismatic of the bunch and Gerard Butler was a good cast for the part, but that isn't saying much. Tom Wilkinson plays a mean-spirited crime boss intent on maintaining power at all costs as good as anyone, but again that doesn't say much either. Thandie Newton as the cold, calculating, fox-in-sheep's-clothing seductress really didn't do it for me. And while I didn't understand the role of Johnny Quid, I'll admit he was certainly an interesting fellow, and when he was on screen he was rather entertaining. All said, a good time can still be had watching Rockn Rolla. It isn't Guy Ritchie's best work by a long shot, but it is a damn good start to his getting back to making movies he is good at. He's mentioned he plans to make a trilogy from these characters starting with the real Rockn Rolla and ending with Rock 'n' Roll Suicide, hopefully between now and then he'll have remastered the art of clever storyteller. That title of Mr. Guy Ritchie's new feature means Giza or Mobster Top Brusa in his London Nana. Sad to say, the film's a shocker. A right depressor. Bit of a dispiritor. For this director, it ain't exactly a departure. And the title means as well as everything else Mr. Ritchie's become a dodgy speller. What a dismaying orthographical decline since his last picture, which we must now think of as Revolver. This was influenced by the belief system known as Kabbalah. Remember? Espoused by his spouse, whose name may originally have been spelt Madiner. However, this one does not have Danny Dyer. That really would have been a killer. But it has got Tom Wilkinson, what a trooper, Gerard Butler, and many an actor who learned to speak Cockney at RADA. It's got Thandie Newton, playing someone named Estella. She's just a stunner in Designa Klaba. And for the filmgoer who recalls her in Flirting, this is a bit of a choker. I think she deserves better. And it's got Toby Kebbell, who once played the man-aga of that northern popwingia who just felt sadder and finally came a fatal and tragically self-inflicted cropper. All of these thesps pretend to be well harder than anyone else, in scenes that get shorter and shorter, accompanied by a well-irritating Mockney voiceover. Each player's got his shoulda. Each of them gets a silly moniker, like 1, 2 or mumbles. Sometimes they wear hats or caps, but a titfut is no substitute for a proper character. There's a violent Russian monster who appears to be a football club proprietor, which may trigger anger in a certain real-life fella from Russia who will holla for his lawyer. I've seen subtler. Guy Ritchie, who is also the writer, moreover has someone saying that London property prices are going to go up and up for Eva and Eva, which isn't exactly clever, given the current financial weather. As so often in the oeuvre of the film's creator, each Sifa sounds like he's a Groucho Club member, a hound of that exclusive London buzzer which contains many a bourgeois Mijawenka who thinks he's a West Ham supporter after a night on the powder. I mean, Mr. Ritchie, this genre, it's over. I mean, doing yet another stinker of a drama about the milieu of the ersatz London gangster? You're taking the piss, Incha. I could begin one of two ways with the phrase open mouth, insert foot, or by crafting an open letter of apology to Mr. Guy Ritchie. Ritchie, whose tendency towards ADD hypercuts, cliched gangster speak, and Scorsese, Tarantino, and Coppola ripoffs evidenced in his last few films irritated me so much that the phrase Guy Ritchie-esque or Guy Ritchie-like has been used more than a handful of times in a negative connotation when critiquing hyper-stylized violent films of the last decade. However, I certainly wasn't alone in my distaste for the overrated writer-director whom Americans just didn't get as much as the Brits, despite my enjoyment of Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and the far too similar, redundant but entertaining Snatch, especially considering that the horrific remake of Swept Away starring his soon-to-be ex-wife Madonna was widely known to be one of the worst films ever made. Yet, after viewing his latest opus, Rockn Rolla, I realized he's made his finest film since Lock, Stock. Yes, it's still filled with his uniquely hyper-visual style, but this time it works exceptionally well to add an impressionistic subconscious level to the film, bringing us deeper into the story, such as when we see the events inside and outside a nightclub where a musician performs and junkies beat the bouncer, or in one of the finest alternatively epic and ridiculous chase scenes of the last few decades of filmmaking, right up there with Raising Arizona, as our anti-heroes led by Gerard Butler try to outrun, outchase, and outmaneuver a group of Russians whom they'd just ripped off. He fills an increasingly complicated plot with so many characters you fear that Ritchie should have supplied us with a cheat sheet to keep them all straight, but luckily he adds at least one clever attribute to differentiate between the overwhelming lot, whether it's the guy who always asks stupid questions or the one who likes Jane Austen movies. We're riveted by his attention to detail. In a film that the press release reveals was inspired by the property boom occurring in London, Ritchie notes that he wanted to take a humorous look at the consequences of the new school pushing in on the old school, since he adds that it goes without saying that because there's so much money involved, there are a lot of people taking advantage of the situation. To this end, the film introduces us to several levels of players involved in the real estate market and those who are linked by mere association with the colorful group he creates. The film is headed up by London's #1 mobster and red tape remover, Lenny Cole, the brilliant Tom Wilkinson, as the type of guy who argues that there's no school like the old school and I'm the F*** and headmaster. Of course, like all amoral kingpins, Lenny wouldn't be half the criminal he is without his sidekick, Archie, Mark Strong, who teaches his subordinates the art of the perfect face slap to transfer those they rough up back to their childhood. Additionally, we're also introduced to the ambitious lower-level underworld group called the Wild Bunch, Gerard Butler, Idris Elba, and Tom Hardy, looking to get into the property racket for themselves. Thrown into the mix, we encounter the very gifted and financially creative accountant Stella, played by Thandie Newton, who sizzles with sex appeal, not to mention as a woman the miraculous ability to sashay her hips without breaking them with each entrance and exit. It seems that Stella's dull life crunching numbers and living with a gay husband sans children finds her all too eager to seek adventure among the Wild Bunch. Using confidential information from her newest client and Lenny's newest acquaintance, the Russian billionaire, Yuri Rodin, Stella interferes, leaking details of bags filled with unprotected cash to Butler's Wild Bunch. Predictably, violence ensues, supplanted by both financial greed as well as the whereabouts of a much-coveted painting which Yuri travels with and lets Lenny take for a while in the hopes it will bring him luck. When Yuri's lucky painting brings unlucky incidents to everyone whose hands it falls into as it changes owners and wall space throughout the entire movie, although like the glowing briefcase in Pulp Fiction itself in homage to Kiss Me Deadly, we're never quite sure what it looks like, all involved become desperate to track it down. Also missing is Lenny's rumored to be dead junkie rocker nephew Johnny Quid, Toby Kebbell, who is not only alive but hiding out for maximum profits via the third erroneous death report of the year. Spending his days scoring dope, listening to Joe Strummer while his record sales skyrocket and avoiding his American music producers, Jeremy Piven and Chris Ludacris Bridges, Quid becomes embroiled in his uncle's scheme when the painting falls into his hands as well. As producer Susan Downey aptly describes the situation in the press release, the film contains all of Ritchie's love trademarks, or more specifically the eclectic mix of characters, the interweaving storylines that dovetail in ways you didn't see coming, the fascinating ensemble cast, the energy, the distinct visual style. But I also think it has an unexpected emotional layer and depth that I think sets this film apart. Similarly, I would add that there's a level of maturity and a tongue-in-cheek or rather less pretentious air about the film than some of his boys-only club pictures prior to this one, as one character reveals his crush on Gerard Butler in a great, unpredictable scene, and we meet a hoodlum who loves to watch Merchant Ivory productions like The Remains of the Day while parked in the neighborhood in his SUV. Balancing out the surprises is his love of shock and awe, whether it's Ritchie's torture device involving American crayfish or poking gentle fun at his countrymen via a robbery so polite that Butler has no problem asking for the keys to a getaway vehicle. Likewise, he uses cinematic references throughout as one junkie unexpectedly misquotes Julie Andrews' much-loved tune The Sound of Music with the phrase, "The streets are alive with the sound of pain." More tightly focused than Ritchie's recent work such as Revolver, which was so impossible to understand and over the top that I quit watching after only 30 minutes, it's more modern and relevant than his other work in depicting the current state of London, as Ritchie described as the middle of the world, in the sense that it's often the last place you go on your way to America, and it's the first place you arrive before you get to Europe. With a skyline that's been altered beyond recognition, as Ritchie continued in the press notes that if you go to the top of any tall building all you can see are cranes, it looks as though the cranes are breeding. He decided he wanted to portray the way the Eastern Bloc nations have gained capital and influence, thereby changing the rules of business and the rules of engagement. While of course, it's a humorous and off-the-wall look at the situation where extremes and exaggerations serve to up the entertainment ante, it's a much more fascinating scope for the picture from the point of view as an American, which is one of the things that turned Piven on to accepting the role as revealed in the release. Intriguingly, in a fictitious landscape of crooked businessmen, mobsters, rock stars, politicians, and thieves, ironically the most innocent characters are the two American record producers trying to make a name for themselves in the music business, who only serve as a gateway from one group of characters to another. Fast-paced, highly energetic and inventively shot by multiple award-winning cinematographer David Higgies, Cambridge Spies, and chopped by editor James Herbert, Black Book and James Bond's Die Another Day, the high-class look of the film is also aided by talented production designer Richard Bridgeland, who began designing stage work at American opera houses, and former graphic designer and fashion couture gown specialist Susie Harmon, who is responsible for costuming the extraordinarily diverse cast. Much better than I thought it would be. Intriguingly, this week finds two directors striving to return to form as Kevin Smith's Zack and Miri fails to capture the humor and freshness of his 90s work, and Guy Ritchie not only reminds us why we were drawn in by him in Lock, Stock, but also proves us how much he's grown. A damn fine achievement, and one where the ending reveals plans for a possible sequel, with a screen that names the characters still left standing who may return. Whether or not it's truly in the works is left to be discussed, but if so, I for one am in the unique position of actually, for the first time ever, anticipating what's next from Mr. Guy Ritchie. And man, I can't tell you how nice it is after years of studying film to be legitimately surprised by those who prove us wrong. A bloody brilliant and jolly good show, as they say in England or as we'd probably say in the States. Not only does it not suck, but it also manages to kick a little ass at the same time. Rockn Rolla. I like Guy Ritchie. I liked his earlier films, purposely avoided Swept Away, and found that Revolver was every bit as good as his first two films. Still, Ritchie got sufficiently bashed by the critics to have him turn back to his typical crime antics. Rockn Rolla has all of the ingredients of early work, yet 10 years later the appeal seems to have faded just a little. Story-wise, Rockn Rolla is a mix of several stories, crossing each other more than once and coming together neatly at the end of the film. The film is set amidst the British world of crime, though Ritchie cleaned up his act a little and went for the real estate angle. Still, it's all shady characters and suspicious-looking people roaming through his newest. If all this sounds familiar, that's because Snatch and Lock, Stock feature very, very similar basics. Ritchie has been called a Tarantino clone from day one, and while his films feature a similar setup as Pulp Fiction, Ritchie's flair is quite different from his American competitor. The British setting alone provides a very different atmosphere from Tarantino's American gangsters. 50% of Ritchie's appeal is without a doubt the British language and its full, flat and harsh-sounding dialects. There's no cursing like British cursing, which is an advantage that can't be matched by the best writer in the world that said, "It's obvious that Ritchie is growing a little older." Dialogues aren't as snappy as they used to be, visually the film is a little tamer and the soundtrack is not as edgy as it was before. Everything about Rockn Rolla seems more toned down, which is a little strange considering the title of the film. Rockn Rolla looks and feels a little classier as a whole, though in the end it is still very much a Guy Ritchie film. But there is still flair aplenty. Visually the film is quite accomplished. Subdued colors, strong use of lighting and perfect framing make it a very pleasant experience. There is some camera trickery resulting in a very cool chase scene, and of course the film includes a scene that features on-screen text, where Ritchie also tips its hat to the dance scene in Pulp Fiction in a very interesting way. Another point of comparison for the Ritchie-Tarantino debate, no doubt. The use of the score is impeccable too, and even though the music itself is a little tamer, it flows particularly well with the rest of the film. Rockn Rolla is a film of a director who's in control of his material and has matured quite a bit over the years. Depending on what you like and want, this could be a good thing or a bad thing. But no matter how you look at it, Rockn Rolla is still a very solid entry in Ritchie's oeuvre, where he demonstrates his feel for timing, swift narratives and sweeping flair. I myself like the spirit of his earlier films a little better, but I was still able to enjoy this film quite a bit. For any Ritchie fan out there, Rockn Rolla is surely a film worth watching, as long as you don't expect another refreshing masterpiece. All elements of his earlier successes are featured here. The film still has buckets of flair and flies by in no time. It's always good to see a new Ritchie film, and Rockn Rolla didn't disappoint. Guy Ritchie would surprise us if he surprised us. Rockn Rolla, his latest mockney crime caper, is exactly what you expect it to be if you saw his Snatch or Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Hell, it's exactly what you want it to be if you loved those films for their exuberant cartoon aggression and winking, wicked wit. After all, no one complains when one Bugs Bunny cartoon is pretty much the same as the one before. No one minds when the Roadrunner shows up the coyote once again. You'd be disappointed, in fact, if you didn't get what you paid for. Speaking of cartoons, Gerard Butler's P.S. I Love You, 300, 1-2, that's his name, though presumably not the one his mother gave him, as kinda the Roadrunner and Wally Coyote wrapped up into one delicious-looking if agreeably dumb package. He and his sidekick Mumbles, Idris Elba, American Gangster, 28 weeks later, also probably not his baptismal moniker, probably aren't actually the stupidest criminals working London's shadier side, but they ain't the brightest, either, and one of their robberies gone wrong devolves into the stuff of a 7-minute Looney Tune. The batter bad guys, for of course we are meant to cheer on 1-2 in his felonious adventures, and we do, cause he's really not such a bad guy. Give chase after 1-2 heists some cash, and the chase turns around so many times, the upper hand constantly shifting, that you can barely keep up, you're laughing so hard. It's one of the high points in a flick that is endlessly amusing. I'd call it all a parody of cinematic male aggression, except I think it's a parody of cinematic male aggression. 1-2 deals with one situation with a fellow criminal in a way that shows he's a lot more enlightened than you'd expect from an agreeably dumb lowlife. Rockn Rolla is also way less brutal a movie than we've come to expect from Ritchie, a lack from whence springs much of the rest of the flick's humor. Which isn't to say that there's none of the OL ultra-violence here, for there is. Don't take your grandmother with you to see this one. But you might call this a crime comedy of manners, what with all the criminals you can barely distinguish from legitimate businessmen, like old-school boss Lenny, Tom Wilkinson, Recount, Michael Clayton, who's never been so funny, and Russian newcomer to the London scene Yuri, Karel Rodin, running scared, the Bourne Supremacy, dryly amusing. They're cooking up a real estate deal that's just this side of shady, which is part of the joke, too, and one that's even funnier, far more bitter now that the real world just this side of shady real estate market has collapsed. Lenny, in one moment, is offended to be thought a gangster, and in his world, where it's all keep the receipts for the accountant, played by Thandiwe, run, fat boy, run, the pursuit of happiness, she's crooked too, and in which thugs who enjoy costume dramas make a ready living scoring hot tickets to West End musicals. Well, maybe Lenny's right to be offended. Being a villain ain't what it used to be, now, it's a respectable living. That's a joke. That's part of Ritchie's big joke, which is that tough guys are smart enough to handle the absurdly circular plot, all missed connections and unexpected liaisons we can barely keep up with, and are pleased to be trusted with the disentanglement of, and it's considered unkind to insult the muscle. Sure, the gentility of the golf course turns into a venue for teaching a vicious lesson to a rival, but that's what happens when the bad guys start wearing sharp suits and expect to be able to conduct their business in the open light of day, and we let them. It's our world. Ritchie's just playing in it. Style can be slick. Style can make almost anything look good. It can be a great distraction. But when there's no substance behind it, style can end up being hollow and unrewarding. So goes Guy Ritchie's Rockn Rolla. Other than a couple of inspired spots, it's style overload with little in the way of genuine substance. So much is twisting and turning that you might think for a bit that something's going on. But like many of the characters in the film, it's all about the setup and not the actual payoff. The times are changing in London. While the real estate game used to be a sure thing for local entrepreneurs, particularly with the right politicians in their pocket, foreign investors are starting to pinch in on the game. This is the launching point for Rockn Rolla, as a couple of small-time but eager hoods, played by Gerard Butler and Idris Elba, look to scam their way up the underworld food chain. Caught in the middle is the old guard Lenny Cole, Tom Wilkinson, who is delusional about his current spot in the game, and a rising Russian star new to the neighborhood, Karel Rodin. Toss in a presumed dead junkie rock star, Toby Kebbell, and a slippery accountant, Thandiwe, and you're only starting to get to the bottom of the ensemble of players. Ritchie's made a name for himself, outside of a paparazzi spotlight, at least, being the former husband of a big-time pop star, making slick action movies like Snatch and Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. When those were made, he was new on the scene and both felt a little different. So you'd think after a decade in the business that maybe his signature approach to storytelling might have changed or grown up a little. Instead, it's still a lot of fast edits, tattooed misfit gangsters and wannabe gangsters spewing out hip dialogue. But rather than taking his distinct techniques a little further, Rockn Rolla is a step back. The biggest issue with the film is that there's no real emotional connection. The plot is driven largely by a chance connection, which allows for all of the crisscrossing stories of theft and betrayal to intersect. The pace is so frenetic that it's often hard to see what story is the central part of the film. I'm all for multi-storied plots, but there should be something central that drives everything. One would think it'd be the large sum of cash that is involved in a heist, but rather than make a big deal of it, the powers that be simply put together another package. What this does is undermine the importance of the money and, in turn, what the film revolves around. By throwing together a new package of money, it makes that group of gangsters look weak. And how the money is used to pay off another group so easily makes the other gangsters look weak. So what you're left with is a group of buffoons with several stories circling them, but there's nobody to get behind. That being said, Ritchie is good at conveying his style, even if there's not a lot of meaning behind it. One particularly good scene plays off the Cold War Hollywood caricature of the indestructible Russian. It's a hilarious farce of a chase scene that includes some gangsters who might as well be direct descendants of Rasputin. But other than that, Rockn Rolla is a loud and convoluted distraction. It's not bad for what it is, but sometimes you just wish that there's a little more substance behind a clever and handsome heist. I went to San Diego last July for Comic-Con, which was certainly a unique experience for me. And I'd heard bits and pieces through the years about how it strayed less from the comic book portion of it and more on the entertainment side. At the 2008 convention, you had features on the comic-related side, like Watchmen, and those that weren't, Pineapple Express? I'll go out on a limb and presume that Rockn Rolla is closer to the non-comic-related side of the house, but sometimes that's not necessarily a bad thing, if the subject matter is any good. The film was written and directed by Guy Ritchie, whose previous film Revolver was a less than stellar film which was rather muddled. This one is a little clearer, as 1-2, Gerard Butler, 300, and Mumbles, Idris Elba, The Wire, are shut out of a potential real estate investment by Lenny Cole, Tom Wilkinson, Michael Clayton. Lenny owns much of the real estate in downtown London, but a growing surge of international businessmen is starting to test his control of his properties and his power. This is symbolized by a Russian named Yuri Kirill Rodin, the Born Supremacy, who embarks on a deal with Lenny and as a sign of goodwill, decides to lend Lenny a painting that brings Yuri luck. That luck goes away, however, when Mumbles and 1-2 rob Yuri of some money that's being used to front the deal. They do so with some inside information from Yuri's accountant Stella, Tandy Newton, ER. Complicating matters for Lenny is that the painting is stolen. The culprit of the crime is Lenny's stepson, a musician that some fear died, and Johnny's producers Roman, Jeremy Piven, Entourage, and Mickey, Ludacris, Crash, don't know where he is. So Lenny's right-hand man Archie, Mark Strong, Sunshine, is enlisted to find the painting while 1-2 and Mumbles avoid some of Yuri's hired help for the money. I know, a film with gangsters, creative characters' names and set in London. Directed by Ritchie, no less. But when you consider that his last couple of films were pretty dreadful, sometimes you need to get back to some familiar footing creatively. And while this feels like more of the same, there are some small wrinkles that show some growth since the days of Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Rather than show the characters talk about themselves in such a way that almost makes them come off as arrogant or showy, you're shown what they do in a slightly more modest fashion. Take Bullet-Tooth Tony from Snatch, and compare him to some of the characters here, and there's hardly a pages-long, several-minute monologue to be had. There's the exotic death or two, crayfish? Really? And the occasional editing montage, cleverly done in one love scene, by the way, to get away from the usual particulars about such a scene. But overall, Ritchie's visual style seems to enhance the enjoyment of the film, rather than get in the way of it. It's slightly reminiscent of what David Fincher was doing in the 90s, before he slightly reined himself in with Zodiac and Panic Room. While there is progress with Ritchie the visual auteur, Ritchie the screenwriter has more room for improvement. Aside from Swept Away, he's yet to do a film that doesn't have the words crime or London in the plot synopsis. To his credit, the routines and capers are a little more serpentine than some of his other films, but there's only so many times you can go back to the well before things dry up. That's why seeing him at the helm of the Sherlock Holmes film with Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law should be interesting. You'd assume the clever camera work and his traditional storytelling are going to have to be tamped down, so it should prove to be beneficial to his growth as an actor. Even with this slightly recycled script, there are some people who put a lot of effort into it. First off, it's exciting to see Elba using his native Brit tongue again, despite how disarming it might be for those used to him as Stringer Bell. He adapts to the role very well and employs some comic delivery at the right moments. As the official Rockn Rolla in the film, playing Lenny's stepson Johnny, Toby Kebbell, Alexander, is pretty convincing as a junkie, but when he snaps back into a point where action is required, he responds in amazing fashion, and his monologue halfway through the film is both whimsical and insightful. I was very impressed. Overall, Rockn Rolla is a nice palate cleanser for Ritchie, and hopefully his talent can branch out into different wear. Guy Ritchie established himself as a filmmaker to pay attention to with Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and Snatch, both British crime comedies. Rockn Rolla, which was released in 2008, marked his next main gangster movie in roughly a decade, and it was quite good. It's not quite as good as the gangster movies that made him well known, but Ritchie is in his element here, and it's quite entertaining for what it was. With the story, characters and tropes, you can definitely tell it was directed by Guy Ritchie. It's very well written, and has some interesting characters and plenty of plot twists. It's also quite funny, very witty, and contains plenty of hilarious dialogue. Like Snatch, there are so many characters and plot lines. The story branches out then effectively ties together at the climax, which I thought was done well. With that said, the story itself was a bit weak and is definitely overcomplicated, even if I like how some of the storylines and characters tie together. The storyline involving Tom Wilkinson's character and the Russians I particularly found a bit hard to follow. It does suffer from slow pacing and being a bit predictable at points, even if I enjoyed watching all of it. It's not a massive criticism, but a disappointment is that it really does fall into the familiar tropes that Ritchie has already fallen into with his past movies. It's more or less the same type of films with intertwined plots and characters of all different sites, all tied together by one little thing. However, those other two movies didn't feel messy or convoluted like it does here. Rockn Rolla is still funny and there's lots of gags, though it does seem to be missing something. The ending also does feel a bit rushed. One point in difference between Rockn Rolla and Ritchie's first two movies that's not better or worse is that it's a little darker and more grounded and realistic, certainly not as offbeat as, say, Snatch. Everything here is sour and shady. It's not devoid of fun, and a lot of the dialogue is hilarious, it's just one way it differs from those other movies. One consistently great thing in this movie is the great acting. There is a large cast and they all do well in their parts. Much of the cast includes Gerard Butler, Idris Elba, Tom Hardy, Thandie Newton, Mark Strong, Toby Kebbell and Tom Wilkinson. They all do a great job. In terms of standouts, for me it's Gerard Butler, Toby Kebbell, Tom Hardy, and Mark Strong. Guy Ritchie takes the style that he had with Lock, Stock and Snatch and combined it with his more modern filmmaking, and it really paid off. The editing is always great and intertwines with the camera work fluently. Visually, it's surprisingly not quite as super stylized as Ritchie's other films have been. There are some characteristic and signature camera tricks of his, especially towards the end of the movie. However, for the most part, it plays more like an ordinary gangster action film. Nonetheless, it works. The soundtrack is great too and is utilized perfectly. Rockn Rolla wasn't quite a return to form for Guy Ritchie, even with it being within the genre that he's known for, but it's still a very enjoyable British crime flick. The characters are interesting, the acting is great from everyone, it's funny, and it's very stylish and generally entertaining. If you liked Snatch, or Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, or really any other British gangster comedy thrillers, then it's worth checking out for sure. Rockn Rolla had a sequel bait ending, and for all of my issues with the movie, I actually did wish that Ritchie made a follow-up, because there was really a lot of potential there. Lenny Cole, a London mob boss, puts the bite on all local real estate transactions. For substantial fees, he's helping Yuri Almovich, a Russian developer. As a sign of good faith, Almovich loans Cole a valuable painting, promptly stolen off Cole's wall. While Cole's men, led by the dependable Archie, look for the canvas, three local petty criminals, the Wild Bunch, steal money from the Russian using inside information from his accountant, the lovely Stella. Meanwhile, a local drug-addled rocker, Johnny Quid, is reported drowned, and his connection to Cole is the key to unraveling the deceits and double crosses of life in the underworld. I enjoyed this film. A Guy Ritchie film remains a Guy Ritchie film, and he generally brings the goods to the table. Rockn Rolla has a specific tailored feel that I spotted in Ritchie's recent The Man from UNCLE as well. The dynamic between 1-2, Gerard Butler, Tom Hardy, Handsome Rob, and Mumbles, Idris Elba, is great, and when Handsome Rob's sexuality is revealed, things get really hilarious. Thandie Newton manages to be a cold-hearted bitch and still work it throughout. She was amazing to watch. I also love some Mark Strong anywhere. He was so much fun. The plot was a bit vague to me. The painting is definitely at the center of everyone's problems and the drama its disappearance causes. It is a good film, rather lighthearted, and if you prefer some class and sass in one film, give it a go. I much prefer The Man from UNCLE to this, but RNR was a pretty decent watch. There's always been something indescribably smug about Guy Ritchie's films, but, like a prodigiously talented but shallow footballer, it's horribly easy to switch off your better judgment and forgive a few foibles with someone who virtually always entertains you, especially when they offer a glimpse of an aspirational lifestyle that you envy when you secretly wish you were someone. It's hard to really hate him. Therefore, like Best, Ronaldo, Gascoigne, Savage or Bellamy, Ritchie keeps getting the big money transfers and I keep paying the ticket price. Next stop after Rockn Rolla? Sherlock Holmes, with Russell Crowe on board, we're told. L'Hervely. And on this basis, I'm possibly 10% less scared about that than I was at the start of today. But then again, look, I pretty much know what's wrong with the effortlessly glamorously violent, testosterone-soaked machismo of Ritchie's Mockney tales. I know what's wrong with the breezy geezer characterizations, the lack of anything resembling a strong female character, and his apparent pathological inability to create, or direct, one. I know what's wrong with his ADHD-stricken directorial style, one that makes Tarantino look calm in comparison. However, I'm a sucker for a camera trick, a kinetic film experience, and I'm a sucker for a skewed morality tale. Always have been, always will be. What's more, as a member of the loaded generation, a boy raised in New Lad Britannia, I feel obliged to take a butcher's hook, you know what I mean? And Rockn Rolla offers plenty to look at, from the oh-so-cool Banksy-robbing title sequence, soundtracked by a super-heavy take on Muddy Waters' I'm a Man from Blackstrobes, to the sharp shooting, the quick-cutting editorial style, the fetishization of London's new-look skyline and the cinematography, the slightly grimy patina of the film stock and its muted color tone. The predictably brilliant soundtrack featuring Lou Reed's The Gun, the Sonic's glorious take on Have Love Will Travel, Kim Foley, The Hives, The Clash, The Beat and the 22-20s, a sharp script with more than a few cracking moments, like the effervescent robbery flashback, accompanied with a claustrophobic, fast-paced, funny, beautifully composed and realized chase scene, and that's before we even get to the cast. Rockn Rolla has neither Jason Statham, he was off making Death Race, and couldn't make it, nor Fleming. No Nick Moran, no Vinnie Jones. Nope, not a whiff of the Vinster, in short, none of the regulars. Good. But, I hear you cry, how can it be a Guy Ritchie movie without everyone's favorite nose-biting let's just forget he's thug and condescend to treat him like a thick guy made good cult hero? I know not, would have been my reply. Now, however, I do. He gave everyone great things to say, and relied on them to act it believably, not something Vinnie's famed for. One could point out, by way of an aside, that with the cast Ritchie has assembled for his return to heightened reality gangland London, the chief subject matter could have been the theft of his, probably macrobiotic, organic and very expensive, shopping, and I would have still watched it avidly. For, when they get going, this ensemble is a truly wonderful thing to behold. What's more, Rockn Rolla emphasizes Ritchie as a director who knows a thing or two about writing and filming banter, for has corralled the elements together wonderfully. He really is shaping up as a British cutie, make of that what you will. He also knows a thing or two about telling parallel stories too, and it is to this tried and trusted method he returns for this self-penned script. A very clever story it is too, trademark stamped with Ritchie's love for a good MacGuffin, serendipity, zemblanity, it's a great word, sharp suits, geezers, guns and a good caper. All this shows up his more linear efforts as being the pedestrian affairs they are, in short, stop this man trying to make straight films. Rockn Rolla, for good and for bad, perfectly showcase Ritchie's ability to write decent male dialogue and direct men, in movies for men, let him stray from this template and it's never nearly as cushy. Guy Ritchie is good at making Guy Ritchie movies, and not so good at not making Guy Ritchie movies. If Guy Ritchie ever learns to accept this, he'll avoid disappointments like Swept Away, and thus so will I. This would be a good thing. And, it's just dawned on me, how ironic is that name? It should be for Guy's Ritchie. Maybe. The ensemble is led by the film's narrator, brick character man, Mark Strong as Archie, the quietly spoken, hard-as-nails right-hand man to property magnate/gangster Lenny Cole, played by the quite glorious Tom Wilkinson, whose eye-catching performance stands head and shoulders above all before him. Wilkinson, so good in so many things, not least Batman Begins, again hits the perfect line between charm, malevolence, and indignance as the voice of the old-school British hard man. He is, frankly, brilliantly two-faced, and wonderfully played. Of course. Strom's performance, cool and calculated, is striking inasmuch as he is the eye of the storm. As events swirl around him, ne'er a bead of sweat breaks across his furrowed brow, nor a crease appear in his sharp, understated apparel. Coming off as some East End Al Pacino, he is the film's dark heart, and the epitome of a Ritchie gangster, dark, sharp, cruel, loyal, and more than a little likable. And, unlike Pacino, not prone to bouts of shouting. Thank God. The main screen time goes to Gerard Butler, whose performance as don't ask, I don't know, is likably comic and smooth after the histrionics of 300, where I saw him last. Alongside, former star of The Wire, Idris Elba and Tom Hardy, best known to all geeks as Shinzen from Star Trek, Nemesis, he forms part of the Wild Bunch, a gang of dodgy lovables trying to get by as nefariously as possible. It seems that Ritchie hopes these characters will center a new mythology around which he can create a new series of underworld movies. The end of the film more than hints at this. There's plenty in the comfortable interaction, charming comedy and shifty blend that the trio bring to the table to hint that he may have hit the nail squarely on the head. Add to this a bravura turn by Toby Kebbell as Johnny Quid, the titular anti-hero, a disappeared, super-intelligent junkie rock star with ties to the darker side of London life, a scenery-critiquing light-hearted cameo by non-so-Anazi merchant ivory-loving uber-tout tank, Karel Rodin, Rasputin from Hellboy, as the stadium-dwelling Russian moneyman, Super Hans himself. Matt King as drug-dealing philosopher and wide-eyed white boy Cookie, and ludicrous double-teaming with the wonderful Jeremy Piven is totally out of their league gig promoters, and you have a formidable squad on your hands, and I've just scratched the surface. I'll even give Thandie Newton a free pass this time, for while she remains the invisibly beautiful cinematic black hole she has always been, there's enough matter floating around in her dark gravitational pull to keep me from falling asleep whenever she comes on screen. Ritchie can't write for women, this much is clear, and her role comes off as a horrible expository afterthought, but that this woman is due to play Condoleezza Rice in Oliver Stone's new flick W beggars belief. Though she fails to suck the life from this film, she gives it a damn good shot though, as the vacuous, manipulative, greedy, uber-bitch Stella, inevitably the weakest characterization of the whole film, a shame seeing as she exists as a fulcrum to the cat's cradle of relationships which make up the storyline. As such, not everything in Rockn Rolla works all of the time. There are a few moments, and some missteps, to my mind. The bottom line is, that with a cast this good when it works, it really works. There are some classic Ritchie set pieces, and a few drop-dead funny moments, of both the black and the blue variety, which all punctuating a sprawling tale. Yes, there are some liberties taken with the script, and if you want to shoot holes in the plot, there are some big targets to aim at. Not all of the strands of Ritchie's frayed storyline are satisfactorily tied either, so if anything, the end of this 2-hour film seems rushed. If there was some drive to come in under the 120-minute mark, I have to applaud this, as I love a lean film, no fat. Weirdly though, Rockn Rolla is not that. I would have liked to have seen an elongated ending in favor of axing some other exposition and Newton's character, who, unless there is to be some payoff in a later tale, seemed completely superfluous by the end, appearing to be dropped like a ton of bricks. Some, what appear to be, cutting room decision leave Rockn Rolla with a suspiciously soft belly and a bit of a glass jaw, but one does suspect that seeds were being planted in order to be reaped further down the line, or at least one would hope that's the case. Not a great film, but a good one. Rockn Rolla adds a fun card to Guy Ritchie's deck, and offers intriguing options for him to return to in the future. With the departure of Madge from Ritchie's life, this is something of a return to form. Swept away, it is not. However, neither is it Snatch, even if it shares something of the same plot structure, and certainly the same setting, in the dodgy dealings of old-school London gangsters. It centers on the dealings between British crime boss Lenny Cole, Wilkinson, and Russian free-market entrepreneur, Yuri Almovich. The latter is to pay €7 million to the former, for services rendered in getting his property deal through, but a crooked accountant, Newton, keeps tipping off one to Butler, who steals the cash, not once, but twice. Cole, meanwhile, was loaned Almovich's lucky painting, only for it to be taken, with the lead suspect Cole's estranged stepson, a rock star and smack addict, who is supposedly dead. Add in the presence of an unknown police informant, as well as a thoroughly unexpected, and, let's be honest, not very necessary, gay subplot, and it's clear you've got enough going on here to fuel several less complicated movies. However, the sense this gives, as opposed to Ritchie's previous work, where it was a feeling of beautifully crafted complexity, is more of a desperate heaving of threads at the script, in the hope something will stick. Don't like this plot? No problem, there'll be another one along in a minute. It's pretty clear that Butler is in a role intended for Jason Statham, the fit isn't a good one, and too many of the other characters also feel like recycled versions from previous movies. There are some sequences which work, most notably a robbery that ends up in a foot chase against a couple of apparently unstoppable Russian foot soldiers. However, it still remains a mess of a movie, one which lacks the focus it sorely needs. I do remain curious to see his upcoming version of Sherlock Holmes, as long as it doesn't cram the plots from Hound of the Baskervilles, The Sign of Four and A Study in Scarlet into one movie. As a fan of Guy Ritchie's Snatch and Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, I was anxious to see Rockn Rolla, a film billed as Ritchie's return to the genre that made him popular Blighty Gangstas. And it delivers in all its familiar fashion. Of course, such delivery can alternatively be seen as a negative, considering much of the film has that been their feel since Ritchie's style of directing and zip-bang editing has been copied and even spoofed since he first embraced the style with Lock, Stock back in 1999. Luckily for me, I like it a lot actually, and welcome back the man that mastered it. In terms of story, it's fast-paced and intricate, so keep up with me here. I'll skip over the film's opening and begin by introducing Lenny Cole, Tom Wilkinson, a London gangster who is trying to close a real estate deal with a Russian tough guy named Yuri, Kirill Rodin. Yuri and Lenny shake hands, and as a gesture of good faith Yuri loans Lenny his lucky painting. Its ability to bring luck is unknown, but its ability to cause havoc is soon realized, but more on that in a second. The deal being worked out is worth $7 million, and when Yuri asks his trusted accountant, Tandy Newton, to get the cash for him, it somehow ends up stolen in transport. Who took it? Well, that plays into the opening of the film, so I will leave it to you to get the details on that. However, about that painting. Yeah, it's gone. Stolen by Lenny's rockstar son-in-law Johnny Quid, Toby Kebbell, who has just faked his own death and is currently drugged up and hiding out, leaving us with one missing rockstar, one missing painting, $7 million missing, and a real estate deal to get done. A conundrum indeed, and that's just the lead-in and a small handful of the characters that play a role in this ride. The film is narrated by Mark Strong, who makes his second major appearance this year, following up Body of Lies, playing Archie, the right-hand man to Lenny Cole, and while sophisticated he does have a bit of a mean side. Strong executes his role well, as does just about everyone else in the cast, which includes a fleet of names including Gerard Butler, Tom Wilkinson, Tandy Newton, Idris Elba, Chris Ludacris Bridges, Gemma Arterton, Jeremy Piven, Tom Hardy and Toby Kebbell. Of the bunch, Strong certainly stands out, but Kebbell is great as the long-winded junkie set to pick up where Daddy left off should Ritchie's proposed trilogy ever get made. Kebbell gets the meatiest dialogue and delivers it in such a droll flair, if there is such a thing, that I only wanted to listen to him pontificate further. However, acting is almost secondary in this flick, as actors seem to chew up Ritchie's scripts and spit them out exactly as intended. Where a Guy Ritchie film succeeds or fails is in its story's execution, and this one works. For the most part, there is no secret as to what kind of film this was going to be. It's just another tightly woven shitstorm conceived by Guy Ritchie and delivered in the usual Guy Ritchie fashion. If it feels like you've seen it before, that's because you have. This is just a new chapter in the same book with the same author. When it comes to Brit gangsters, Guy Ritchie is the Stephen King of film. I don't have a problem with that at all. The laddish writer-director Guy Ritchie, Snatch, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, unapologetically sticks to one genre, the crime film. Unlike most directors, he doesn't seem to be pining away for the day he can make his own Schindler's List and then wait for the Oscars to roll in. Having come up at the same time as Tarantino and happily ridden his wave, Ritchie is content to stick to twisty, coincidence-driven plots and the gangsters, whether flash or trash, who inhabit them, exception, the remake swept away, with his now ex-wife Madonna. And he's good at what he does. As far as it goes, his latest, Rockn Rolla, breaks no new ground for movies or for Ritchie, but it is an amusing diversion and therefore a return to form. Like most of Ritchie's stories, Rockn Rolla is an ensemble piece, tangling a number of characters from the London underworld. At the top of this particular heap is Lenny Cole, Tom Wilkinson, a classless but businesslike gangster with old-school moves. According to his lieutenant Archie, Mark Strong, Lenny Cole has the keys to the back door of this booming city, but his position is threatened by the rise of Russian mobsters taking orders from the no-nonsense Yuri Almovich, Kirill Rodin. Then there's the small-time outfit known as the Wild Bunch. Hey, I saw that movie. Between smash and grab robberies, Partners 1-2, Gerard Butler, and Mumbles, the great Idris Elba hang out at the local pub with the other druggies, tramps and thieves, including handsome Bob, Tom Hardy. Bob has 2 reasons to be nervous. He's about to be put away for a stretch, and he has a secret that 1-2 wouldn't take kindly to hearing. Entwined with both the have and have-not crime classes is the very gifted and the financially creative personal accountant Stella, Tandy Newton, who lives in a marriage of inconvenience to a homosexual lawyer. And junkies abound, first among them Lenny's stepson, troubled rock star Johnny Quid, Toby Kebbell. The rumors of his death have been greatly exaggerated by Johnny himself, who wants out of his personal hamster wheel and knows that, when it comes to record sales, he's better off dead anyway. Johnny's plan complicates life for 2 of his handlers, Roman, Jeremy Piven, and Mickey, Chris Bridges, who must contend with those who want to find Johnny. Ritchie's gift for narrative trickery keeps Rockn Rolla humming along. Bits of it feel like warmed over Tarantino, up to and including a denouement promising, James Bond style, a sequel. It's anyone's guess how firmly Ritchie's tongue is in his cheek. Ritchie is, of course, also copying himself, but there's some degree of freshness this time in his upstairs-downstairs approach to London's criminal classes. Though phony, the vivid characters provide ample opportunity for scenery chewing. Wilkinson has the most fun. As he's lying, Lenny insists, it's all about the details, and when he later spits at his son, "What are you, boy, if you are not poison?" matters suddenly seem Shakespearean. A speech about the duality of superficial surfaces and their flip side, the ugly truth, almost sounds like an authorial confession of Ritchie's too cool for school of crime cinema, but Rockn Rolla is just spirited enough to justify its existence. A return to form from director Guy Ritchie has placed the popular British filmmaker in an awkward position. Stray away from your tired but true formula, and be prepared for a lashing. Or repeat the winning combination that won you universal acclaim and you will have an entertaining, yet predictable film. And so we come to Rockn Rolla, a highly energetic, colorful, yet repetitive crime movie, which shows off Ritchie's knack for creating big-talking hard men doing very bad things, and looking cool while doing it. As expected, and, truth be told, prayed for, Ritchie has formulated a multi-character, multi-plotted film, which is fueled by dashing style, memorable characters, and jargon-filled, infectious dialogue. The core of the film revolves around a real estate deal between Yuri, Kirill Rodin, a Russian developer with deep pockets and dangerous acquaintances, and Lenny Cole, Tom Wilkinson, an old-school gangster who is the unofficial king of London's property sector. An unhinged Wilkinson takes to his role with seemingly glorious delight, adding weight to what is really a stock Ritchie heavy, old, temperamental, and violent. Things get complicated, to say the least, when Yuri's unfulfilled accountant and first substantial female character in a Ritchie crime film, Stella, Tandy Newton, hires 1-2, Gerard Butler, and Mumbles, Idris Elba, to steal Yuri's £7 million cash delivery, which is en route to Lenny. 1-2 and Mumbles are a part of a low-level crime gang known as the Wild Bunch. 2 factors have kept the boys on their toes. The first is that there is an informer lurking somewhere within their ranks, and the second is that one of their best men, handsome Bob, Tom Hardy, has revealed he is a homosexual, which in turn gives 1-2 a temporary case of the willies. And although it is a subplot that does not quite work, it is handled with a refreshing, un-PC honesty. On top of all of this lies another subplot involving a stolen painting which belongs to Yuri, who considers it to be his lucky charm. It has fallen into the hands of Lenny's rock and roll junkie stepson Johnny Quid, Toby Kebbell, who comes across as the bastard child of Keith Richards and Pete Doherty. Rounding out Rockn Rolla's cast of misfits is Lenny's right-hand man Archie, who also provides narration, played by Mark Strong in what can only be described as a breakthrough year for the actor, who impressed greatly in Ridley Scott's Body of Lies. Fans of Ritchie's acclaimed work will more than likely get off on Rockn Rolla. Yet for all of the comfort it provides, Rockn Rolla only offers temporary relief. Sure, Ritchie is a deft hand at creating seedy yet appealing worlds where gangsters, thieves, pimps, and junkies roam free. Rockn Rolla returns Guy Ritchie precisely to the world that made his name, the low-level underworld of Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, 1999, and Snatch, 2000, which were in turn the inspiration for a UK geezer subgenre, sexy beast, layer cake, etc. It's a step back to basics and an assured return to form for Ritchie, leaving the viewer marveling afresh about how a director this confident could have produced Swept Away and Revolver. Can he only make the one film commercially? That isn't the point. The main challenge for Rockn Rolla is to get viewers back into the cinema to see a film that feels dated. It's almost a nostalgia trip, although a fun, smart and snappy one at that. It's not just a case of Ritchie going back to basics with story and construction. Stylistically he borrows very heavily from himself as well, and that makes Rockn Rolla feel very last century at times. The success of Rockn Rolla is going to take enthusiastic word of mouth and some perseverance and grit on the part of Warner Brothers, but this could do all the business of a snatch. Wide $83 million, $30.3 million in the US, $17.5 million in the UK. Led Gerard Butler is no Brad Pitt, but at least you can understand what he's saying here. Internationally, Ritchie's name still has some cachet, and if this goes out on the back of a solid UK gross, it could gain some traction, especially with urban crowds. Either way, it's a comeback for Ritchie, despite the caveats. Ritchie's own screenplay here is sharp and observant amidst the usual gangster banter viewers are so familiar with. At its heart is the friction between old-style London crime lord Lenny Cole, Wilkinson, playing against type, and the new Russian criminals led by oligarch Yuri, Rodin, helpfully shot against the backdrop of a football pitch. Rockn Rolla's gang of anti-heroes bounce around between these two figures. The action kicks off when Yuri asks Lenny to smooth the way for some of his real estate deals by paying off the crooked local politicians he has in his pocket, lending him his lucky painting in the process. Things go wrong, of course. Lenny and his sidekick Archie, strong, very good, can't quite grease the wheels fast enough. Yuri, meanwhile, is being robbed blind by his thrill-seeking accountant, Newton, good, who uses the services of likely lads 1-2, Butler, Mumbles, Elba, and handsome Bob, Hardy, to carry out her heists. And things spiral out of control when Lenny's supposedly dead and deeply unpleasant rock star junkie stepson, Keble, steals the painting and Yuri decides he wants it back. Rockn Rolla is almost defiantly entertaining throughout and Ritchie directs at fast pace, a wide roll call of supporting characters helping to move the proceedings along. Nobody here is pleasant but they do grow on you. Production values are as expected, and Ritchie's shooting style hasn't changed much in the last decade. A single aspect of the otherwise blur Rockn Rolla distinguishes writer-director Guy Ritchie's latest attempt to take his mind off his home life as the soon-to-be ex-Mr. Madonna. The aspect in question is Tom Wilkinson. Terrific character actor, Wilkinson. He's played so many Americans the last few years, in The Bedroom and Michael Clayton and others. It's a pleasure to hear him rap that silky voice of his around the role of Lenny Cole, a high-living East End London lowlife. He turns a tired archetype into a fresh creation. The rest of Rockn Rolla steals freely from Ritchie's luck, stock in two smoking barrels and snatch, glossy, cooler-than-thou crime sprees designed for a brutish laugh or two. Gerard Butler is our alleged rooting interest, a petty crook named 1-2 who heads up a loose consortium of merry schemers nicknamed the Wild Bunch. A land grab scheme having to do with pricey London real estate, pricey at the time of filming, anyway, leaves them in debt to Lenny, Wilkinson. Not for long, though. There are sniveling vicious Russians buying up everything in sight, and there is a precious painting, the whereabouts of which involves Lenny's drug-addled stepson, Toby Keble, so good in the recent Control. Ritchie, who shoots and cuts everything in Rockn Rolla like an ad for a particularly greasy brand of fragrance for men, delivers the beatings and killings in his trademark atmosphere of morally weightless flash. The film will have its defenders. I like my crime stories to say something more than cool way to torture somebody, and I'd rather rewatch Ritchie's remake of Swept Away starring the soon-to-be ex than have another go-around with these wise guys, scheduled to return in a sequel. Any cannot question Mr. Ritchie's dedication to his craft, except for that foray into pee-whipped nepotistic tomfoolery. The man clearly has a damn good time making his films, adores his characters and puts every ounce of himself into their presentation. But despite this, it's hard to ignore his early Tarantino/Boyle worship and penchant for ripping scenes and shots almost verbatim from their films. Or, even if not direct rips, shows his adoration all over the celluloid, or magnetic digital tape or whatever they shoot on these days. Now don't get me wrong, there aren't movies I'd rather see than True Romance, Shallow Grave, Pulp Fiction and Trainspotting, favorites all, but somehow Ritchie's films feel like the JV version of these now classics. Okay, Snatch felt like the JV version, this one was more like the sophomore team, if there's such a thing. And I actually liked Snatch a lot, so this unfortunate comparison doesn't necessarily sink this film. What Ritchie does do well is draw colorful and complicated cartoon characters. No, these are not the fully fleshed out character studies you'd find in a Paul Thomas Anderson movie or tear your heart out novel adaptation, because these characters still need to steal cars, shoot guns, be made to look like idiots, even the toughest of them, and eventually end up smirking in triumph. Certainly cartoon characters, but endlessly entertaining ones. This stems from the snappy dialogue, especially in this case from the thought-to-be-dead rock star, Johnny Quid. Raised in a wealthy family and sent to all the best schools as a boy, he is now a self-conscious junkie poo-pooing society and all that comes with it. He is the skeletal voice of a generation in decline, and he's damn funny. He's easily the most interesting character in the film. Among the other characters is 300's Gerard Butler as the leader of a gang of hooligans with hearts of gold, sort of. At least when he says he has his brother's back, he means it literally, you'll see. There's the old-school British gangster, Tom Wilkinson, who is always awesome. And there's sexy, but corrupt lawyer Thandiwe Newton. She's easy on the eyes, but cold as ice. It's a nice, well-rounded group of quirky characters, not at all unlike the nice group of quirky, nicknamed lowlives in Snatch. The camera shots are skewed, the editing quick and the style nothing but modern adrenaline. The man does know how to aim a camera. The man can also spin a yarn, although for some it might come off as a bit convoluted. There's a lot of borrowing from Peter to pay Paul to rip off Jesus, or whomever, all filtered through the muffled low-class brogue that most of the characters tend to speak, if they're not speaking Russian. I kind of like the pretzels that he creates with his narratives, but the missus shook her head in frustration several times, and eventually gave up trying to figure out who was screwing whom. I always find pausing and recapping with a loved one works for me. It's not an easy film to just have on in the background, unless you want to just kind of spy the eye candy as it rolls past. And, funny enough, Guy seems to really aim his films to guys. This ain't The Notebook, it ain't Love Actually, and there isn't even a whiff of Jennifer Aniston, Kate Hudson, or Drew Barrymore anywhere. Dudes, welcome, you made it hard on yourself, Guy, when you served up your biggest hit on the first go-around. And then everyone expected that it would just get better and better, but so far it's only been worse. Until now. Rockn Rolla, did you make that up, or is it actually used in the London underworld? Isn't exactly a masterpiece, but unlike Revolver, I didn't feel the need to shout out loud what an incompetent ass you are. The visual aspect is great and the cast is excellent. The story itself is okay, but I was disappointed in you as a storyteller, even though that's never been your strong suit. You fill every hole in the screenplay by writing in new characters, which is, don't get mad at me, a rather shitty approach. Who is supposed to know what's going on? And not even the final clash had the intensity of Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and where the hell did the manic numero uno go? You know, the one we would give a damn about from start to finish and our asses would pucker when he got into a bad situation. Was that supposed to be one too? Or maybe Johnny Rockn Rolla Quid, or Archie? My sympathies shifted between all three and occasionally made a detour to Carell Roden. I have an inkling that this is the film's problem, not mine. Also, I have a problem with the insensitive elimination of some of the characters in the hasty finish, besides Roden and Thandiwe Newton, who for a moment looked like the greatest masseuse, like the only one who had figured out how to elegantly navigate the sewer of the London underworld, and then, just like that, she leaves the playing field without even saying goodbye. That's a shame, because a little more tenderness could have spiced up your, well, guyish, vulgar and sexist world within a world. In other, less important cases, you conversely didn't spare any minutes, or hollow jokes. Speaking of which, just know what was the point of the gay episode, with the perfectly disparaging subtitle ending. After finishing it, however, it could have served the same purpose that Thandiwe didn't serve. Why the two Russian bulldozers? Why not deport them back to Siberia after the obligatory action scene? These are cases of utter bullshit, I know, but you probably didn't expect anything constructive from me anyway. Rockn Rolla isn't your best movie or even the second best. In fact, it's maybe your third best, which, given the low quality of your filmography, really doesn't mean it can be called a great success, but it contains enough of that good old Ritchie atmosphere that I can seriously think of it as such. I'm giving this 3 stars, but next time I would advise you to go in a completely different direction. All kidding aside, you could direct some energetic romantic comedies. Appendix: the heavyweight soundtrack has better effects than soft drugs. A spoiler warning for those who haven't seen the movie. Okay, Stella the accountant was betraying Yuri the Russian gangster by giving the Wild Bunch the information about the money transfers. Yuri didn't want to consider this possibility, despite Victor's warnings, because he was attracted to Stella. One of the other plots of the movie was Yuri had his lucky painting stolen, and by a series of coincidences Stella ended up in possession of it. The irony was that Yuri caught her with the painting and believed she was guilty of stealing it from him, when she was actually innocent of that. Yuri was really proud of his painting and liked showing it off. Stella worked for him and he was trying to impress her. So how plausible is it that Yuri would have never shown the painting to Stella? Realistically, she should have recognized it as soon as she saw it in 1-2's apartment. But it was clear from her conversation with Yuri that she had no idea it was his painting. How did Yuri not know this? Even if he assumed Stella had learned about his painting from somebody else, it should have been obvious to him from what she said that she had no idea that it was his stolen painting. If she had known it was his painting and he had caught her, she would have tried to tell some plausible lie or even the implausible truth. But she clearly wasn't acting like somebody who had just been caught red-handed. So was it just a plot hole, or am I missing something? Was there some other element involved that I overlooked? Or were we supposed to assume that Yuri was so upset about finding Stella with his painting he just wasn't thinking rationally? Or were we supposed to figure out that seeing his painting made Yuri realize that Victor had been right and Stella had betrayed him over the stolen money? After a bit of a downturn, writer-director Guy Ritchie snaps back with an uneven but entertaining sort of return to form. With Rockn Rolla, Ritchie also shows a new maturity, using a bit of restraint dispensing his flashy cinematic tricks. Sure, he can't resist slow-moing then fast-forwarding the sexy slink of Thandie Newton, and he overindulges in the druggy degeneracy of his titular character, but for the most part, he sticks to his storytelling. Which also happens to be Rockn Rolla's main problem, as Ritchie apparently never meets a character or idea he doesn't like. The ensemble cast of his latest is so massive, they can't all be done justice, and by the time the stories come to a close it's a bit of an untidy mess, even if all the pieces, technically, have been accounted for. Lenny Cole, Tom Wilkinson, in the bedroom, Michael Clayton, is proudly old school and believes he holds London in the palm of his hand, so when Russian mobster Yuri, Karel Rodin, the Bourne Supremacy, Mr. Bean's holiday, comes to him to help grease the planning wheels to get a stadium built, Lenny bilks him for €7 million for the job. But Yuri's accountant Stella, Thandie Newton, W., who he carries a torch for and entrusts with coming up with the cash, hires 1-2, Gerard Butler, 300, Nims Island, to steal it. 1-2 and his Wild Bunch buddies of Mumbles, Idris Elba, 28 weeks later, Prom Night, and Handsome Bob, Tom Hardy, Layer Cake, Marie Antoinette, were just shafted in another real estate deal by Lenny, but now have the cash he'd strapped them for. There's a second steal, a precious painting, never seen, a la Tarantino, that changes hands, a rock star who fakes his own death to increase record sales, a couple of unrequited love affairs, and various and sundry hustlers that weave in and out of this complex tale, frequently punctuated by humor and bursts of violence, often in the same frame. Ritchie has articulated his London gangster class as well, with points of view from below the curb, a couple of junkies who fence stolen goods, to those bored with 3-story yachts, Yuri, and cinematographer David Higgs, Derailed, uses a palette that alternates rich mochas and espressos, old school, with bright modern whites, new school. Characters are established in tableau which change with swish pen edits and voiceover. Dialogue is a cult unto itself. The cast varies, with the great Wilkinson playing Lenny as a man whose suit still wears its hanger, but adds little but bark in a disappointing take. Better is Mark Strong, Body of Lies, as wronged right-hand man Archie. The Wild Bunch are a terrific trio, with Handsome Bob's admission of romantic love for 1-2 adding a tangy twist, and Mumbles as unflappable advisor. Toby Kebbell, Alexander, so memorable in last year's Control, proves another force as Rockn Rolla. Johnny Quid and Nonso Anazi, happy-go-lucky, marks himself as one to watch his tank, a mid-level trader who watches Merchant Ivory films in his SUV and appreciatively notes the Swedish pine masquerading as English oak in Lenny's office. Chris Ludacris Bridges, Crash, Max Payne, and Jeremy Piven, HBO's Entourage, provide their names more than any real character as Johnny's managers. Newton is smooth as silk as an indifferent object of desire. Roden plays against type, a gentleman amongst thugs. Rockn Rolla should have been tighter, but it plays like a sprawling jam session. The surprising rise of its rock star successor is a nifty plot line, but it's at odds with the world it weaves into. This is a throwback to Guy Ritchie's early days when he rose to directing stardom with Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch. However, it lacks the freshness of his debut flicks. Technically, Rockn Rolla reps an evolution in Ritchie's film Kraftwerk, but the story, by the director, does not show the same evolvement. The enormous, talented cast combines with the multi-layered, multi-threaded story to make an exciting, at times, crime yarn that suffers from its too many plot lines. I found myself thinking of the Much Better the Bank Job as I watched Rockn Rolla, and the comparison is obvious. Ritchie is a good director, but his latest film is derivative of his own work, making me think that he has progressed as much as he can as a filmmaker. Maybe his marriage to Madonna drained his soul. Now that they are Splitsville, he might prove his earlier potential. Gerard Butler is small-time con man, 1-2, trying to make it into the big league with his partner in crime, mumbles, Idris Elba. Tom Wilkinson is good as the ruthless mob boss Lenny, but does not have the airtime his second-build character should have had. Mark Strong continues to show his versatility as an actor as Lenny's loyal, right-hand man, Archie. Thandie Newton is a weak point as Stella, the accountant for the mobs. Her character is underwritten, especially when compared to the mostly male cast. Toby Kebbell is terrific as the Rockn Rolla junkie Johnny Quid. Rockn Rolla is fun, ridden with dark humor mixed with violence. Ritchie should have performed some judicious editing to pare down the fat in the film. Its near 2-hour runtime should have been more like 90 minutes. Rockn Rolla, the latest action/crime movie from British director Guy Ritchie, takes a look at the gangster underworld of modern-day London, where real estate is now a bigger business than drugs. Lenny Cole, played by Tom Wilkinson, is the biggest real estate player in London. He has all the right people in his pocket, from politicians to police to thugs, and he can make any red tape disappear. However, there are a lot of other criminals and businessmen trying to get into the real estate market, and they will use any means necessary to knock Lenny from his perch. From low-level street hustlers to high-end Russian mobsters to junkie rock stars, everyone is out to lie, cheat, and steal their way to the top in this ultra-violent movie where no one is safe, and nothing is off-limits. Rockn Rolla feels a lot like Guy Ritchie's other crime thrillers, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch. He brings together the fast-paced action and multi-layered story, along with some comedic elements, by using quick edits and fun camera angles. That said, his methods feel retread in this movie. It seems that Ritchie's second verse is the same as his first. The criminal element is disturbing, the violence and foul language are overwhelming, and the story feels unoriginal. Rockn Rolla hosts a huge A-list cast, and every actor commits to giving a very good performance. However, the characters bring nothing redeemable to the story. Everyone is an anti-hero, and although some of them reap what they sow in a bizarre skewed morality, others continue and flourish in their wicked ways. Along with the overabundance of immorality, the movie also has strong homosexual worldview elements that seek to normalize deviant behavior as well as some very strong depicted drug use. All in all, Rockn Rolla is not worth the time or money of any media-wise viewer. People of faith and values would be better served to spend their time seeking for worthwhile entertainment that does not glorify immoral, criminal behavior. To find which movies are morally uplifting, please go to www.movieguide.org. How does an actor tap his inner psycho baddie? The novel answer this year is, by disguising himself as an ugly bald man. Tom Cruise got his freak on by playing the corrupt studio boss of Tropic Thunder as a repulsive chrome dome nerd, and now the wily Tom Wilkinson so brilliant as the lawyer who went out of his gourd with guilt in Michael Clayton Goes Bald, pudgy, and horn-rimmed as a gnashing cockney mob boss in Guy Ritchie's decadently entertaining Rockn Rolla. For these actors, grotty makeup is liberation, the freedom to hurl themselves into disgusting behavior. As Lenny Cole, a gangster who rules the thriving real estate market in London by bribing politicians and muscling them to whatever it takes to send his deals flying through the bureaucracy, Wilkinson spews his lines with the frothing relish of an angrier Michael Caine. He's the rare actor who can telegraph joie de vivre while lowering his enemies into a pool of hungry crawfish. The thing is, Lenny isn't even the film's heart of darkness. Early on, he brokers a deal with a dead-eyed Russian billionaire, Kirill Rodin, and it's the Russian, a monster of global capitalism, who represents anarchy. Lenny, by contrast, is a brute with a code. Up till now, I've more or less hated Guy Ritchie's piston-pumping music video approach to crime. His thrillers, like Snatch and Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, are so laminated in blood and poses and stylistic frosting that they're not hip, they're numb. But Ritchie, in Rockn Rolla, dials down the cool ultra-violence and finds the discipline to tell a good story. As a hood who works for Lenny, and fearlessly rips him off, Gerard Butler, from 300, uses his burly, earthy gruffness to ground the film, and he's surrounded by terrific actors like Thandiwe, cold as dry ice as a mob accountant, and Tony Kebbell, who plays a junkie rock star with feral energy and the hungriest of eyes. Ritchie cribs shamelessly from Goodfellas and Tarantino, but he also riffs on gangster homophobia, the mechanisms of urban sprawl, and the evil ways of addiction. He concocts a crime jungle demimonde that's organically linked to the real world, and it's a damn fun one to visit. Waarom genie ten we talk zo van actie en gangster films? De meesten van ons zin mensen die zich houden aan de wet en aan ons godsdienstig geboden. We proberen ons centjes zo eerlijk mogelijk te verdienen en houden rekening met ons medemens. We geven geld aan ontwikkelingslanden en misdaden helpen we zelfs als vrijwilliger aan het oplossen van maatschappelijke problemen zoals armoede en ongelukkigheid of de teleurgang van het milieu. Ho het oké zich, we leiden niet het leven van een rokeloos, op geldbelasting en drugsliefhebben maatswellestelling, die niets liever doet dat geld spenderen dat hij van anderen heeft gestelen en die eigenlijk alleen geïnteresseerd is in vreten, zuppen, slapouwe horen, seks en nog meer geld, het liefst zo makkelijk mogelijk verdiend, mocht niet uit warmie. Met zulk anderen twoordelijk types kunnen of willen we ons talk niet identificeren? Talk? Guy Ritchie weet wel better. Hij mag den wel geen crimineel zin, voorzover we weten, maar als je getrouwd bent, geweest, met Madonna, dan zal het stempel burgerlijk worstenlijk niet op je leven van toepassing zijn. Oké is het bekend dat hij als jenling van een exclusive schoolword discourse vanwege drugs en seksueel escapades, ja, helemaal het zin duum zuid hij diver haltjes dus niet. Virtual alle personages in zijn films bewegen zich in de gedukken van ons samenleving en Ritchie weet het allemaal zo heerlijk te verpakken, dat we tweeërlang gebiologeerd zijn door al die smerigheid, die o zo lekker is. En natuurlijk is het echt gangsterleven vernemelijk geweld met stress en angst, moet je continue op je hoede zin en is de kans dat je de pensio engerechtigd liefdet halt klein, althans buiten de gevangenistan. Maar wat maakt het uit, een pensionbouw je tak niet op Rockn Rolla is Ritchie's weird gangsterfilm, in de typisch stripeachtig stil met flashy montage, die we voor het eerst leerden kennen met zijn hit Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels uit 1998, 2 jaar later gevolgd door het misgeen nog wel genialer Snatch, waarin een onvergetelijk Brad Pitt de show steelt. Rockn Rolla kent geen rollen die zo uitspringen, het is hier het ensemble dat de show steelt. Iedereen is op zijn best en het spelplezier straalt eraf. De hipvormgeving is niet over the top, oké gemmatigder dan in de illustre voorgangers, maar de film heeft een paar ander groot pluspunten, het scenario is vlekkel is en de regivalwassener dan eerder, Ritchie ligt gegroeid. Het netwerk van personages en, verhaal, lignen, en dat zinner zoals gewoonlijk nogel wat, wordt zorgvuldig opgebouwd zonder al te doorzichtige structure, waardoor de opbouw van de spanningsboog niet nooit perfect is. Met ander woorden, van het begin tot het eind op het punch van je stel. Dies man weet ho het moot. Rockn Rolla is een heerlijk cocktail van verboden vruchten. Lekker fout en talk goed. Hard, maar niet te hard, grappig, maar geen dom comedy. En na de film loop je met een big smile de bioscoop uit en vol je opgeladen om weer een tigi en het brave burgers tap te verdwijnen. En dan maar hopen dat Guy Ritchie snel met weer een film komt die je even het gevoel geeft dat stouts en heerlijk is. Dat vervolg zit trouwens allen de pen, aan het eind blijven we zitten met een paar loose ends, maar wordt ons verzekerd dat die wordens opgelost en het nog niet gemaakt tweede deel van Rockn Rolla, Wicked. It's easy to imagine the critical cynicism that's likely to ensnare Guy Ritchie's return to the Cockney crime caper. After the success of Lock, Stock and Snatch, he became the latest tall poppy to be motor-mowered by the press pack when Swept Away sank and Revolver fired blanks. So, he made a couple of duffers and married a pop star, hang the cocky bastard from the red tops. Truth is, Ritchie's return to gangland, geezerism and guns is a very good thing. He's one of Britain's most exciting filmmakers and is one of the few not to have hightailed it to America at the first hint of Hollywood interest. He deserves due credit. Rockn Rolla is a Brit thriller unlike most anything made here anymore. It's vibrant, exciting cinema, not bloody television with posher set catering. And, perhaps fueled by, yes, relief, it's made with an almost tangible sense of confidence, of joy. The director is back in a familiar playground and, as underworld boss Len, Tom Wilkinson, tells his right-hand man Archie, Mark Strong, "There's no school like the old school and I'm the fucking headmaster." Len is the fulcrum of a labyrinthine plot that moves like shit through a goose and we're not going to bother untangling here. Suffice to say it involves property, a painting and enough pungent, credible, charismatic characters to suggest the promised 2 follow-ups will never want for engaging anti-heroes. There are off-screen stories for everyone, from the brilliantly played wild bunch of 1-2, Gerard Butler, Mumbles, Idris Elba, and Handsome Bob, Tom Hardy, to the blink-and-miss bit-parters who make even minor exchanges memorable. It's cruel to single anyone out, but David Leon and Bronson Webb make a distinct impression as a kind of junkie Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Then there's the Rockn Rolla of the title, a crack-addled musician who's been compared to Pete Doherty, except Toby Kebbell has more charisma in the saliva on the tip of one of his chain-smoked cigarettes than Doherty has in his whole sorry carcass. It's a superb performance from a young actor unafraid to appear unpleasant and unpalatable, tapping a feral intensity but somehow clawing back the character from complete damnation. Along with the performances, pounding soundtrack, listen for the great use of Lou Reed's The Gun, and peppy dialogue, come Ritchie's gloriously ostentatious visuals. The slow/fast-mo gallery peek at Tandy Newton is terrific, a wry comment on how new money is taking over London and a sly wit, best displayed in a wham-bam sex scene montage. As Archie says, a real Rockn Rolla wants the fucking lot. In una Londra infernisia immobiliare elementicato magnate Lenny Cole decide chi, come quando passa ad unir license, sfruttando la sua posizione a sfavore dei meno potenti. 1-2 ella meco mumbles sono stati appena fregati dal ricco businessman, che li aveva a luci con il miraggio di un permesso di uso, salvo poi impedirne l'excitazione e hanno una settimana di tempo per restituirgli il prestito di 2 milioni. Archiviati du flop, travolti dal destino e il sottovalutato revolver, e un matrimonio ingombrante, Guy Ritchie torna alla formula del cinema che gli ha dato il successo e alla malavita londinese fatta di feroci criminali e gangster di strapazzo. In un turbinio di personaggi assessori carati, imprenditori russi, tirapiti, contabili ingonella, capobaggerini con il pelino dell'art, killer invincibili, rockstar drogate, di accendi e di traffici si divericano e si intrecciano le storie di Lenny Cole, Tom Wilkinson, 1-2, Gerard Butler, e del leader dei Quid Lickers, Johnny Quid, Toby Kebbell. Il primo sta per concludere un affare milionario con un pezzo grosso della mala russa deciso a investire 7 milioni di sterline nel Mat1. Il secondo manda inconsapevolmente in fumo la delicata operazione per ben 2 volti. Il terzo, che del primo e figliastro, si è appropriato di un bene prezioso aggravando ulteriormente la faccenda. Nonostante la trama apparentemente complicata, Ritchie si dimostra capace ancora una volta di saper svolgere con mestiere la matassa, tenendo saldamente l'estremità del filo senza mai perdere di vista la fine. La battuta di Cole è tutta una questione di dettagli, calza a pennello il regista inglese che regala ad ognuno dei suoi personaggi una caratteristica, una battuta, un'azione bizzarra quanto memorabile. Catarando con l'obiettivo una sedicantiere di cemento grigia e aggiosa, zuma sui volti, sugli abiti, sugli accessori, fermati, fotografando una microsocietà all'interno di una macrosocietà, entrambi altrettanto caratabili. December tratto dalla malavita e dai suoi meccanismi, Ritchie genera, prima sulla pagina e poi sul grande schermo, villain amabile e pieni di fascino, talvolta fessi ma in fondo umani. Collocandoli all'interno di una storia di risvolti paradossali che non manca del consueto lido fine rivela di sobrano il fascino e segli di mostrare la natura violenta senza eccedere nella rappresentazione stessa della violenza. All'agilità e scadodia in montaggio di videoclip di autor che tramuta una scena di sesso in un orgasmo cinematografico alterna momenti misurati, decelerati dalla stupefazione di un brano, the gun di Lou Reed, o de un sensuale ralenti. Con Rockn Rolla l'ex material guy rientra al cinema di genere in forma smagliante revelando di essere guarito dal blocco del regista. Bentornato fra noi. Rockn Rolla, 2008, is a stylish, fast-paced British crime film directed by Guy Ritchie, the filmmaker known for his energetic storytelling, sharp dialogue, eccentric characters, dark humor, and complicated criminal plots. Released in 2008, the movie brings together gangsters, businessmen, thieves, drug dealers, corrupt officials, musicians, and criminals in a chaotic London underworld where almost everyone has an agenda. At its heart, Rockn Rolla is a story about money, power, greed, betrayal, and survival. Nobody in this world is completely trustworthy, and almost every character is trying to gain something from someone else. The movie takes the familiar gangster film formula and gives it Guy Ritchie's distinctive personality. Instead of focusing only on violence, it builds its entertainment around clever conversations, unusual characters, unexpected twists, and a constantly changing series of alliances. The story begins with the changing face of London's criminal underworld. Real estate development and international money are becoming increasingly important, and traditional gangsters are trying to keep up with the new generation of wealthy businessmen and criminals. At the center of this world is Lenny Cole, a powerful London gangster who has spent years building his reputation and controlling various criminal operations. Lenny is played brilliantly by Tom Wilkinson. He is one of the strongest characters in the movie because he combines confidence, arrogance, humor, and menace. Lenny believes that he understands how the criminal world works and that everyone ultimately answers to him. However, as the story develops, he discovers that the balance of power is changing. A major player entering London's criminal scene is Yuri Almovich, a wealthy Russian businessman. Yuri wants to establish himself in London and becomes involved in a major property deal. His arrival creates opportunities for the local criminals, but it also creates competition. Money starts moving between different groups, and everyone wants a piece of it. Yuri's business dealings become connected with Lenny, and this relationship forms an important part of the story. Lenny sees an opportunity to make a huge amount of money, but things become complicated when the people around him start making their own deals behind his back. At the same time, the movie follows 1-2, played by Gerard Butler, and his group of small-time criminals. 1-2 is ambitious and confident, but he is not powerful enough to operate freely in London's criminal hierarchy. He wants to make serious money, but he and his friends keep getting caught in situations involving people much more dangerous than themselves. Gerard Butler gives 1-2 a strong screen presence. He brings confidence and energy to the character, making him easy to follow even when the plot becomes complicated. 1-2 is not the smartest or most powerful man in the criminal world, but he has enough intelligence and determination to keep himself alive. The relationship between 1-2 and the larger criminal world is one of the movie's most entertaining elements. He wants to move upward, but every step he takes brings him closer to people who can destroy him. His plans constantly become more complicated, and the audience is left wondering whether he will actually succeed or simply become another victim of the criminal system. One of the movie's greatest strengths is the way it connects different characters and storylines. At first, the various plots can appear unrelated. One character is dealing with a property transaction, another is trying to steal money, another is searching for valuable information, and another is trying to protect his criminal empire. Gradually, however, these stories begin to overlap. This interconnected storytelling is one of Guy Ritchie's trademarks. He enjoys creating worlds where every character is connected to another character in some unexpected way. A small decision made by one person can create serious consequences for someone completely different. The screenplay is full of quick dialogue and sarcastic humor. Characters rarely speak in a completely straightforward way. They threaten each other, negotiate, lie, joke, and manipulate one another during conversations. This makes the dialogue an important part of the entertainment. The movie also has a strong sense of British identity. The London locations, accents, criminal culture, pubs, offices, expensive houses, and underground environments create a distinctive atmosphere. It feels like a modern London crime story rather than a traditional American gangster film. Another important character is Johnny Quid, played by Toby Kebbell. Johnny is a famous rock musician whose behavior is unpredictable and chaotic. His character adds another layer to the movie and represents the connection between the worlds of rock music, celebrity, drugs, and crime. Johnny Quid is one of the strangest characters in the film, and that is exactly what makes him memorable. He does not behave like a normal criminal or celebrity. His unpredictable personality creates several entertaining moments, and Toby Kebbell gives the role a unique energy. Mark Strong also delivers a strong performance. His character is quieter and more controlled than many of the other people in the movie. His calm personality creates an interesting contrast with the louder and more aggressive characters. The supporting cast is another major strength. Rockn Rolla has a large group of talented actors, and each character has a distinct personality. Even when some characters have limited screen time, they often leave an impression. The film's humor is particularly effective because it is often mixed with violence and danger. A scene can begin as a serious confrontation and suddenly become funny because of a character's reaction or an unexpected line. This mixture of crime and comedy is one of the reasons the movie feels different from a conventional gangster drama. Unlike many crime films that take themselves extremely seriously, Rockn Rolla is comfortable making fun of its own characters. The criminals can be dangerous, but they can also be ridiculous. Their plans may be clever, but they can also fall apart because of simple mistakes. This creates a balance between tension and entertainment. The audience can enjoy the criminal world without feeling that every scene has to be dark and depressing. The movie's visual style is also very recognizable. Guy Ritchie uses stylish editing, dramatic camera movements, energetic sequences, and carefully selected locations to create a fast-moving atmosphere. The film feels modern while still maintaining the gritty personality associated with British gangster cinema. The editing is especially important because the story contains many characters and several different plots. Information is often revealed gradually rather than all at once. Sometimes the audience knows something that a character does not, while in other moments the movie deliberately hides important information until later. This keeps the audience involved. You have to pay attention to names, relationships, deals, and conversations because small details can become important later. The soundtrack also contributes significantly to the film's personality. Music is used to reinforce the rock and roll attitude of the movie and its characters. The title itself reflects the film's connection to music, rebellion, and the idea of living outside conventional rules. One of the most interesting aspects of Rockn Rolla is its exploration of power. The movie shows that power is not always about physical strength. Information, money, reputation, connections, and fear can all be forms of power. Lenny believes his reputation gives him control. Yuri believes his money gives him control. 1-2 believes intelligence and confidence can help him move upward. Other characters use secrets and information to manipulate the people around them. The result is a world where nobody can completely trust anyone else. Trust is one of the movie's recurring themes. Characters make agreements, but those agreements are often temporary. Someone can become an ally in one scene and an enemy in another. A person who appears to be helping may actually be preparing to betray another character. This creates an atmosphere of constant uncertainty. Money is another major theme. Almost every major decision in the film is connected to money. Characters steal it, negotiate for it, hide it, invest it, or kill for it. Money is not simply a reward, it is a source of power. The movie also explores the changing nature of organized crime. Traditional gangsters are facing a new world dominated by international business, wealthy investors, organized networks, and more sophisticated criminals. Lenny represents an older style of gangster, while Yuri represents a newer international business-oriented criminal environment. This contrast gives the movie more depth than a simple story about criminals chasing money. Despite its complicated plot, the film never forgets to be entertaining. There are plenty of moments involving action, violence, comedy, and unexpected situations. However, the movie does not depend entirely on action sequences. Instead, much of the tension comes from conversations and decisions. A character walking into a room and talking to another character can sometimes be more suspenseful than a shootout because the audience knows that one wrong word could change everything. The action scenes themselves are generally short and effective. Rather than filling the movie with constant explosions, the director uses violence selectively. This makes the important action moments feel more significant. Another strength is the movie's pacing. It moves quickly, and there is usually something happening. The rapid pace matches the chaotic nature of the story. Characters are constantly moving from one situation to another, and new problems appear before previous problems have been completely solved. However, the fast pacing can also be a weakness. For viewers unfamiliar with Guy Ritchie's style, the number of characters and overlapping storylines may be confusing. Some characters appear briefly and then become important later. Different criminal organizations interact with one another, and several plans are happening at the same time. Because of this, Rockn Rolla is a movie that benefits from paying attention. It is not necessarily the type of film you can watch casually while doing something else. Another weakness is that some storylines feel as though they could have been developed further. Certain characters have interesting backgrounds, but the movie does not always spend enough time exploring them. The ending is also unusual. Instead of giving the audience a completely closed conclusion, the film leaves some elements open. This can be satisfying for viewers who enjoy the possibility of a continuation, but it may disappoint people who want every storyline to receive a clear ending. In many ways, the ending feels like the beginning of another chapter rather than the absolute end of the story. This connects with the movie's larger feeling that London's criminal world continues even after the main events are over. Criminals rise and fall, alliances change, and new opportunities appear. The movie's title, Rockn Rolla, captures its attitude perfectly. It suggests a lifestyle built around music, money, confidence, rebellion, and danger. The characters are not ordinary people living ordinary lives. They are constantly taking risks and pushing their luck. Guy Ritchie's direction is probably the biggest reason the movie works. His style is immediately recognizable. He does not simply tell the story, he creates a particular rhythm and personality around it. The quick dialogue, unusual characters, stylish visuals, dark comedy, and interconnected storytelling all work together. Fans of Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch will probably recognize many elements of his earlier work. However, Rockn Rolla is not simply a copy of those films. It has its own characters and its own atmosphere. Gerard Butler is especially effective as the central character. His performance gives the movie a strong emotional and energetic center. 1-2 is ambitious but vulnerable, confident but not invincible. That combination makes him interesting. Tom Wilkinson is equally impressive. Lenny is arrogant, powerful, funny, and dangerous. His belief that he can control everyone creates some of the film's best moments because the audience gradually realizes that his confidence may be misplaced. Toby Kebbell's Johnny Quid provides some of the movie's most unpredictable moments. His character adds humor and chaos to an already complicated story. Mark Strong brings a quieter intensity to his role, helping balance the more exaggerated personalities around him. The supporting performances make the criminal world feel crowded and believable. Every character seems to have a history, a secret, or a personal agenda. From a technical perspective, the film has a strong visual identity. The cinematography supports the gritty London setting while allowing the movie to maintain a polished and stylish appearance. The locations are used effectively, moving between luxurious environments and rougher criminal spaces. The movie also understands how to use silence and tension. Not every scene needs loud music or action. Sometimes the strongest moments come from characters simply watching one another and trying to figure out who has the advantage. That is what makes the movie more than just a collection of gangster cliches. At the same time, Rockn Rolla is not a deeply emotional movie. It is primarily interested in entertainment, style, crime, and character interaction. Viewers looking for a serious emotional drama may not find enough depth here. But that is not necessarily a problem. The movie knows what it wants to be. It wants to be stylish, funny, violent, unpredictable, and entertaining. The movie is particularly enjoyable for viewers who like stories where nobody is completely innocent and where the balance of power changes constantly. It rewards viewers who enjoy clever dialogue and complicated criminal schemes. If you prefer straightforward storytelling with a simple hero, a clear villain, and an obvious ending, Rockn Rolla may feel unnecessarily complicated. But if you enjoy crime movies with multiple characters, unexpected connections, dark humor, and stylish filmmaking, it is worth watching. One of the film's biggest achievements is its atmosphere. From the opening scenes, it establishes a world where money and crime are closely connected. The characters seem to understand that the rules are flexible and that survival depends on knowing when to negotiate, when to lie, and when to fight. The movie also has a certain confidence in its own style. It does not try to explain every joke or every character. It expects the audience to keep up. That confidence can be both a strength and a weakness. For fans of the genre, it makes the film exciting. For viewers who prefer simpler storytelling, it can become frustrating. Overall, Rockn Rolla is a highly entertaining British crime film with a talented cast and a distinctive directorial style. It combines gangster drama, dark comedy, action, music, and clever storytelling into one energetic package. It is not a perfect movie. The plot can be complicated, some characters could have received more development, and the ending leaves several elements unresolved. But the performances, dialogue, atmosphere, soundtrack, visual style, and unpredictable storytelling make up for many of these weaknesses. The film's greatest achievement is its ability to make a complicated criminal world feel entertaining rather than exhausting. Even when the plot becomes confusing, the characters remain interesting enough to keep you watching. For fans of Guy Ritchie, Rockn Rolla is a worthwhile addition to his filmography. For fans of British gangster movies, it offers a modern and stylish take on the genre. And for viewers who simply enjoy crime stories filled with betrayal, humor, money, and unpredictable characters, it provides plenty of entertainment. This film. Directed by Guy Ritchie. Written by Guy Ritchie. Produced by Joel Silver. Starring Gerard Butler. Cinematography David Higgs. Edited by James Herbert. Music by Steve Iles. Production companies Dark Castle Entertainment. Distributed by Warner Brothers Pictures. Release date September 4, 2008. Running time 114 minutes. Countries United States. Languages English. Budget $18 million. Box office $25 million.